So here are all of my encouragements for you all to make terrible decisions as I am the GM.
Ash has a crossbow bolt in her side, 0 dots in skirmish, and 0 dots in wreck. And I'm so excited to see this get even worse. So that's 1 vote for escalation.
Skelly has 3 guns and all the ammo.
Crossroads has no guns, but Crossroads is a gun powered by ghosts.
Have we established that your guns are special to you? I feel like we're establishing that your guns are special to you.
Before this crew, they were my only friends.
You've known us for 5 days. You've known those guns a lot longer.
These are my babies.
Yeah.
I just want to say, Rowan was starting to do this, and then he realizes to harvest. This doesn't help. Like, don't do that.
This is not.
No.
This is
Like,
not
don't do this.
thing.
Yeah.
Doing this to an executioner?
Yeah, that's not
I'm
what you
just
want.
like this, like.
We call that the go sign, you know? Like, yeah.
Oh man.
This theme's great. I will do a fortune roll. Notes. No thoughts. Head empty. 1! I rolled a 1!
Yep. Aha. Hello everyone. Apologies for that. I'm sorry that you went from not being able to hear me to being able to hear me and my very loud fan that I cannot reduce by any means necessary. But hello everyone. Let's bring that up a little bit as well. Hi everybody, it's me, Brandon O'Brien. The a GM for yet another Speculate special event on this channel. Thank you so very much for joining us today. Tonight is going to be very exciting. I'm very excited to see what shenanigans me and our crew will get into this evening. I've been thinking about this for a while now. This has been consuming several of my brain cells permanently for quite some time. So we will get into it very shortly. But before I get into our Speculate introductions, first, some housekeeping notes about this channel. There are all sorts of lovely ways that you can support this channel and the work that takes place on it, including by subscribing to the YouTube channel, by following Gregory A. Wilson on Twitter, by supporting patreon.com/ArvanEleron, as well as patreon.com/Speculate, which you can find out more information about at speculatesf.com, but I will end up repeating that information for you all very soon. And of course, by joining the Discord channel, where you can continue interacting with all of the lovely people who are in this community, all of whom I'm so very excited to be able to share space with this evening for tonight's Speculate special event of Girl by Moonlight, which I will have so many lovely things to say about very, very soon. Before we get into the actual thing, I'm just going to briefly point out that the designer of Girl by Moonlight, Andrew Gillis, just so happens to be joining us this evening. Thank you so very much, Actual Factual, for being present. I'm very glad to be able to show off this game. I've been thinking about Girl by Moonlight ever since it was announced. I can't wait for people to actually get their hands on a book that says Girl by Moonlight and get the opportunity to play it because it looks rad. And I'm very hype about getting to play it for you all right now and giving you all the opportunity to see it as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to switch over to some lovely friends of mine. But first, I'm going to interrupt them while they were obviously having a very thoughtful conversation.
My other tour guide.
That I'm sure I just totally ruined. They could have been, like solving so many of the world's problems right now. And I just decided to barge in and insist if they would like to play a game with me, which makes me a very terrible person, but still, I'm very excited to have all of these strange friends with me here this evening. Hi, everybody. I'm so very excited for us to get into Girl by Moonlight, because I am almost running out of excited things to say about this game, and we will get into all of the delightful stuff that we are prepared to engage in very, very soon. But before we do that, I would like very much for all of my strange friends to please introduce yourselves to the lovely folks in chat by please letting everybody know who you are and what you do, starting with Mike.
Hey everybody, I'm Mike. I publish as Michael R. Underwood. I write kind of inclusive action adventure, often with a found family element. My latest novel is Annihilation Aria, which is kind of like if you took the 1999 Rachel Weisz, Brendan Fraser, The Mummy, and smushed it together with Guardians of the Galaxy. So that is a fun one. And I'm one of the 3 co-hosts of Speculate, and I also stream video games at twitch.tv/turbotango. He, him pronouns for me. I don't know about the character yet. They don't exist.
Not yet, but they will. Next, Valerie.
Hello. I am Valerie Valdez. I am also an author, pronouns she, her. My books are Chilling Effect, Prime Deceptions, and forthcoming Fault Tolerance, coming in May. They are also found family space operas that pair super duper well with Mike's book. And I also write things like poetry and short fiction. You can find that online. And I stream on Twitch as the kids are asleep, mostly video games like Secret of Mana and Mass Effect and Horizon Zero Dawn.
Nice. Next, Yoi.
Hello, time zone friends. I am Yoi Gawain Lin, pronouns he, they. I am a game and fiction writer. Again, character does not exist. No pronouns or even anything at all, really, for them. So, that'll be interesting. Cannot wait to see what happens.
And Iori.
Iori Kusano, they, them pronouns, Clarion West class of 2017. Mainly I'm a feral moomin, but sometimes I do write things. But most of those things are tweets. Honestly, I think the main thing I do now is play Yu-Gi-Oh! There are no character pronouns yet, but there will be later. I am excited for this.
So am I. And, again, for me, I am Brandon O'Brien. I don't like the word game master because I'm not a master of anything. So I like stage manager. I will be the stage manager for this game. He, they pronouns. I am a writer, poet, and game designer from Trinidad and Tobago, as well as one of the co-hosts of Speculate, alongside Michael R. Underwood and Gregory A. Wilson, otherwise known as Arvan Elron. And you can find out more information about Speculate at speculateSF.com. And your support of Speculate via patreon.com/speculate helps us continue to do cool things like play a game that does not exist yet, so you get to see how cool it is, because Girl by Moonlight is very cool, and I'm very excited to dig into it further. So, we should begin, of course, by discussing what series we want to play. We have been thinking about this for quite some time. All of the series playbooks for Girl by Moonlight are very enticing. We spent a lot of time genuinely debating how many of them we all want to play, but we did settle on a thing. Mike, what did we settle on?
We will be playing In a Maze of Dreams, about a magical/dream conspiracy.
Aha. And I should, just for the sake of letting people know all of the cool things that are in this rulebook, I should actually find what the rulebook says as description for In a Maze of Dreams. Dream travelers seeking the truth of a magical conspiracy. In a Maze of Dreams is about desire, mass culture, and ideas developing a life of their own. It is filled with guarded hearts whose truth can only be found in dreams. The protagonists are tangled up in the conspiracy, a multifarious, sinister plot, a virus of human thoughts. They seek to unravel the conspiracy, lest it devour our dreams and make a nightmare of the waking world. So this sounds delightfully weird. Y'all know I like weird. If you've ever seen any episodes of The Case of the Cindered Seal, you know that I like wild things happening because they can. So dreams and playing with dream logic is definitely up my alley. So what does everyone else think? Before we actually get into character setting stuff, I'd just like to hear some of your initial thoughts about why you wanted to play this one.
I'll go first. I love surreal shit where the dream world and the real world are bleeding into each other. Definitely my touchstones for how I'm thinking about this are Boogie Pop Never Laughs and Serial Experiments Lane. I think we can get into some really interesting stuff about the boundaries of identity with this theme.
And I'm very intrigued by that as well. Yoi, what are your thoughts?
For me, going off of touchstones, for something that's always interested me is the idea of liminal space. Spaces that are both there and not there, but also eternal. And as a result, something that's always kind of struck a chord in me are various stories from various folkloric traditions that usually involve a character going into the spirit world or the supernatural world, or I guess like the most publicized manifestation of this would be like going into the Fey realm and then coming back, and the character is aged like decades, whereas only a few years have passed for them. So the perception of time, the perception of what life has been lived in that perception of time, and what has been lost as a result when you come back. There's been a lot of very interesting things I've dug up, just going back to like my own neuroscience roots, like thinking about the hallucinations or the alternate lives that people kind of flash through when they've had traumatic brain injuries. And they come back, and it's they're left almost with a sense of grief because they've lived an entire life while at the hospital or unconscious or something like that, and they come back and suddenly life is just not the same anymore because they've had a whole other lifetime experience. So yeah, a rambling explanation of what I'm pulling from here.
Oh yeah, definitely. You are allowed to ramble today. That is fine. Valerie, what are your thoughts?
So I'm gonna also echo Lane as a touchstone for me. There's also a really old show that got canceled prematurely called VR5, which involved the ability to delve into people's dreams, and it was about solving a mystery. Brandon, are you remembering this show?
Yes, I remember this. Oh my god, VR5 was actually wild.
For real, and so yeah, that's another good one for me. But I'm also interested, like you was saying, in liminal spaces, and I'm gonna pull in also the Silent Hill stuff because I'm really interested in the idea of contamination and crossover and the ways in which the sort of dream world can contaminate and infect the waking world. And that definitely appealed to me here as well. And also the notion of being able to control one world via controlling the other and vice versa, really I found interesting.
Cool. Neat. And Mike?
So I'm a person who mostly doesn't remember their dreams. So like I'll remember a dream more than 10 minutes after waking, like once every season or two. And so therefore for me, dreams and like the dreaming and dream logic is already kind of an elusive, strange thing, which I think makes it an interesting kind of landscape to play through and in for me. And like I did undergrad and graduate work in mythology and folklore, and like night hagging and cultural contextualization thereof, and urban legends, and like Jungian pop psychology that was treated more seriously now, decades ago, and is now largely regarded as bunk, but can be interesting for creative work. So that's kind of my vibe with this.
Cool. As for me, this was I tried not to push anyone, but this is the one that I was hoping everybody would pick because I have a bag of touchstones that I just kind of dropped on everybody when we said that we were going to play this. The Persona games, Paprika, which I'm very glad is like in the same kind of space as this game. Um, some Kamen Rider series, which I'm not going to bore you with all of my rambling thoughts at this moment, but trust me, I have a lot of Kamen Rider thoughts that fit into this game. So I'm very excited to not only explore like some of the weird and strange imagery that comes out of dreams and dreamscapes, but also I think that using dreams as narrative motifs are like very enriching in a way that I'm very excited to explore. Like, how can you learn things about yourselves and your fellow PCs and NPCs through what is being described around you? So I'm gonna really like playing with that as we create some setting stuff, which means that we are
Day when I fuck something up, I hear that "oh no" sound.
oh god. Are we back? I think we have returned. Okay. Apologies for that. OBS seemed to be in league with our enemies. Um, so hopefully we should have returned by now. At which point we should probably start doing the thing. Ah, yes, we are indeed alive. I am sorry for OBS deciding to root for the conspiracy in that moment, but we should begin our setup for In a Maze of Dreams by asking and answering some questions about the series itself. So, first, the conspiracy. What is the conspiracy? An ideology turned virus, a single dream that plagues the world, a toxic cultural movement, history haunting the present, or the pull of some alien mind. And I will say as well that if there is something that emerges from these descriptions that does not necessarily fit but still plays within the realm of those things, I am fully open to us discovering a thing as well. You do not have to pick something that is from the sheet. But what do you all think?
Personally, I do like history coming back for the present. Mostly because, again, touching on liminal space and folkloric ideas, liminal space is always portrayed as something that is very old, that has hung around and kind of lingered at the edge of everyday unthinking life. And, sometimes it creeps through. Sometimes, I don't know, the stars and the metaphysical forces align just so that on certain festival days the veil grows thin. And, you have to reckon with your history and all of that kind of stuff. And also, returning from liminal space again, you're reckoning with what has happened, your own personal history. So that's kind of the one I gravitate to immediately.
Okay.
I love it. Let's heal some generational trauma.
I'm very excited to dig into that and figure out exactly what that means in this context as well.
These strange moons can fit so much generational trauma.
Oh god.
I think there's also ways to blend these. Like, I'd be interested in seeing history haunting the present blended with a single dream that plagues the world, because that makes me think about how history is shaped, what narratives become dominant, etc.
Yeah, I'm especially interested in history haunting the present mixed with something else.
Because that does give me a kind of impression of wrestling with a kind of cultural guilt as well, but through a kind of language that exonerates people who do not deserve to be exonerated, or justifies actions that cannot be justified, and clashing with that in the dream might be potentially interesting. So yeah, cool. Next, what is its impulse? To reshape our dreams, to drive us to self-destruction, to make us shed our bodies, to shatter the barrier between waking and dreaming, to instill an alien morality in us, or to turn reality to farce.
I'd be really interested in a blend of driving us to self-destruction and instilling an alien morality in us, because I think there are a lot of social structures that are working towards those two aims in tandem.
Noted.
Yeah, I'm both tempted by and appalled by to turn reality to farce, because that feels a little real for the album right now, potentially.
Is reality a farce right now? Maybe we're dreaming at this moment. Oh my god.
Or maybe we just live in absurdist theater.
Yeah,
Wake me up inside.
Oh god.
because some of these, like if we're doing history, to shatter the barrier between the waking and dreaming, does that mean that the conspiracy seeks to annihilate time in like a Dark Soulsy way?
I kind of love that.
I would be down for that. Also, it would allow me to work in the idea of shedding your flesh, being released from your mortal prison. Meat. That's the through thread for all of our campaigns now. It's meat.
Just meat.
If I say I'm not going to talk about the Fade and Dragon Age, is everyone going to give me a gold star? It's like, Valerie didn't talk about Dragon Age. Wait, I just did, damn it.
Oh god.
You don't have to hold back.
We can have a bingo card for like the things that we will talk about.
Yeah,
So
we
there's
can have an
Kamen
ocean
Rider
of
on one
touchstones.
square. There is the Fade in another square. There's meat in another one.
An appearance of birds somewhere on that bingo card.
That is extremely necessary.
Yes.
I haven't talked about birds yet, but I will at some point. It is guaranteed.
Noted. Next. Who are its hosts? A secret society, artists and luminaries, a cabal of sorcerers, an online gestalt, a sentient dream, or ghosts and echoes?
I like the idea of a sentient dream because history acts as its own entity, almost, in terms of how its interpretation and how it pervades social discussion kind of morphs and changes on its own in its own weird little quirks. So I like the idea of like the thing that the characters might be trying to change having its own mind and having its own impulses, if not aims.
I'm definitely intrigued by the ways in which different conspirators might be attempting to manipulate that directly for their own purposes, which sort of implies a secret society, but I would want the two to be working in tandem if so, because yeah, I think the notion of it reminds me of AI and the ways in which AIs can be so quickly corrupted, like watching chatbots become Nazis in real time and the horror of it. And so something like that, where it's like there's a very clear will and sort of secondary entity that is being unreasonably influenced potentially by bad actors.
And I like how that. Oh no, continue.
And also how that kind of ties into like the very classic trope of, oh, we thought we were in control of this thing that we discovered and wanted to use to our own ends, but it's gotten out of control. It's broken out of the lab. I'm a geologist. Rock on table is now rock on floor. You know, that kind of thing.
Oh god. I was gonna say I like how this like accidentally leans back into the ideology turned virus space of the conspiracy, where there is a thing that we are tapping into because we thought that it gives us power, but it is attempting to control us as well, and we are not noticing it, which I think is very intriguing. I take it that we're settled on that then, a sentient dream, just to make sure that I'm not missing anyone else's thoughts.
Yes, Mike, you have not contributed. Do not want to leave you out.
Yeah, I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around how all of these things are fitting together, in terms of the conspiracy is a single dream. Its hosts are a sentient dream. Are those one and the same? Is the conspiracy, this conspiracy and the host, are those semiotically, psychologically, or spiritually coterminous? Or is any given host like a metonym for the conspiracy itself?
I think the dream might be dreaming itself, and then the people it is using as hosts become just its little appendages out in the world.
Yeah. Like, I'm thinking of like the distinction between the conscious and the subconscious. That it is perfectly possible for some layer of this distinction to be the part of the dream that is aware of itself and the part of the dream that itself is not, even though it still acts and has thoughts and motivations. And how do you reckon with both of those things, for instance?
And I'm definitely interested with like that Cartesian idea of I think, therefore I am. So the idea that the dream is creating itself and perpetuating itself really appeals to me.
Yeah, I dig that a lot. Next. By what vector does it infect us? Insular communities and coded language, hopes and desires, passions and conflict, fashion and ritual, consumption and excess, or a half-forgotten song.
I really love the... Go ahead, Mike.
I want to make a pitch for fashion and ritual, because fashion extraness.
I mean, yeah, imagine all of the weird dresses that I get to describe now.
Then I would like to build the insular communities and coded language around these subcultures of fashion.
Okay.
My immediate thought was yes, as in just like all of them. It's just, I was like, yeah,
For me too, if we were going to draw off the idea of like history being the driving force, history and so much of like the idea of things being haunted, a lot of it ties to a specific place, like a place being like the scene of something terrible happening, perpetuated over time, or a place being like the site of one singular extremely terrible event that may or may not have been forgotten. And since location in itself has such a strong impacting factor on like what kind of clothes you come up with, what kind of materials you have to create those clothing, what colors that you would have access to in order like to make these things. Again, it depends on what kind of world ultimately we are creating. But I think it would be really, really easy and also very fitting to like tie all of that together through the history book here.
Because I do think that they come together in this very interesting semi-contradictory but perfectly melded way, where the thing that is being described is supposed to be counter-culture, but it has since just become culture, and like still considers itself like rebellious and contradictory, but has been so thoroughly consumed and made part of the space that it's in that it can say whatever it wants, but everybody is already at least marginally aware that it exists and is either in favor of it or never has really thought about it much. Which I think is really interesting, because it means that we also get to play with that subconscious awareness of whether people know that it's there, in the kind of way that everybody buys Coke but nobody knows why they buy Coke. They just buy Coke because they've seen Coke, which I think would be very interesting as well. Next. The waking world belongs to everyone and no one. What defines the waking world? Choose one or two. Looming spires, the press of bodies, crisscrossing wires, media saturation, protests and riots, smog and haze.
I kind of go for spires and haze, because, you know, fog, liminal space, ooh, and then like the creepiness of like a physical landmark kind of pulling into view. I immediately think of like the Midwest and gas stations as liminal spaces, and you know, you're driving down that long, lonely highway and you see that like, oh, that one little protruding whoop whoop of a gas station. You go there, and then you leave, and then you look behind the mirror, if you know, break the rule of never looking behind in the mirror, and it's not there anymore.
I think we could make a case for media saturation and the press of bodies based on Mike's ideas about fashion and ritual, because these are things that are enacted and transmitted by being in proximity to others, whether that is the mental proximity created by media or actual physical proximity of observing the people around you.
Yeah, these start to raise the question of like what sort of dystopia do we want this to kind of be embedded in / emerging from / undermining, like, because there's the version of this that where we include protests and riots, and like just go all the way into like return of the repressed, history like reasserting itself against forces of like erasure and like smoothing out of everything into kind of a digestible narrative of reality.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the kind of dystopia that the characters have not fully examined. So something that is pleasant and decent on the surface, and the only reason it's apparent as a dystopia is the specific pressures being leveraged against our protagonists, would be very interesting to me.
Valerie, what stands out to you?
I feel like I think that the visual nature of looming spires appeals to me, in the sense of locating this in an urban environment rather than a suburban or rural environment. And because I think that if we have two things that we're going to pick from here, I feel like one of them should be a visual, but that's just, I don't know, my writer brain, I guess. But then the other thing being media saturation, I think makes sense if what we're going for is that kind of just given the other stuff that we've talked about so far in terms of the sentient dream and infecting us via communities, coded language, fashion, and ritual, that feels to me like media would probably be involved, but I feel like I could also make a case for any of the other ones, honestly.
Coded notes and telegrams and all that kind of thing. I do kind of like the idea of like media control going back to analog, as opposed to defaulting back to like, oh, everything is like digitally transmitted and stuff. Like just people passing like notes to each other in the streets, or messages being painted on walls, or even if we want to go back to like Victorian times, like fan language or umbrella language or signalings with handkerchiefs and stuff like that.
Bringing in fashion, I think about like how in certain communities the way that you wear the laces on your boots matters, and that's the kind of thing that we could potentially bring into this as an analog form of communication. Tattoos, graffiti, fashion.
Am I going to have to create a clothing cant for this game? Because I will.
We could go Great Gatsby and just have a green light everywhere and confuse everyone about what that means.
I also like the notion of like attempting to outwit surveillance with face paint and things like that. There's basically like anti-surveillance clothing and makeup and things like that that are really cool to think about.
Yeah, like a media saturation with a much higher degree of tangibility compared to like the kind of standard Gibsonian cyberpunk, where there's just tons of like AR and VR. If media saturation includes like there's always music, or there's always announcements, and anything else that's like really textural seems very interesting.
Or the notion of like permanent Google Glass situation where you have literal pop-up ads that will happen anytime you pass a certain location, or sort of a visual representation. In I think my second book, I had the equivalent of Pokestops, basically, where it's like, yeah, you pass a place and suddenly here you go, you get this quick ad of whatever is going on. Or like in Mass Effect, when they have the different kiosks and walls that have ads that are playing constantly. Stuff like that can become, and like I was talking before about contamination and intrusion, that sort of media presence, because it is almost like being constantly spammed in ways that you can't control, then becomes its own form of contamination. And like in Paprika, the different ads and billboards and things like that, imagine if that became physically aggressive, basically. That I think is really cool.
Like one of the things that I really am excited to do in this game, since we discussed that we wanted to do an urban space, is to play with a lot of things that show up in Paprika and Satoshi Kon's television series Paranoia Agent, which is that ads, billboards, flyers, and stuff like that consume so much space that they actually tend to become thought at some point. And that complicates your relationship to your own brain and the outside world, because you feel like there comes a point where you are only thinking in the terms that people have constructed for you to think. So I think that would actually be really cool.
Yeah, and having that analog versus digital kind of tension, I think, would be really cool.
Neat. So, next. What shapes our dreams? Choose one or two. Money, work, surveillance, possessions, edifices, status, sexuality, conformity. All of these sound very intense, first and foremost. Sounds like a very emotionally hostile way to self-embody. to constantly have, like, to live in a state of mental doubt about any of these things. Sounds very harsh.
I think, given that it seems like we are pulling on fashion and ritual, conformity seems to be the easiest one that, like, or at least the most obvious one that jumps out at that list for me. Because so much of ritual and fashion is to delineate what you conform to, or what you are conforming against.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so is that like conformity as related to belonging?
Well, I imagine it also fits one state of obedience as well, in the very kill la kill sense of what you wear is a signifier of who you are, uh, who you belong to, what service you are bound to, etc. I take it that we're settling on the thing then?
I think we are.
Oh, fair enough. Next, what do we hide from others? Choose one or two. Passion, emotions, gender, vulnerability, authenticity, sexuality, intimacy, dissatisfaction.
I think the focus on in fashion here makes authenticity the obvious pull, but I also want to make a case for vulnerability.
I was about to
Seconded.
say the same things, yeah.
Yep.
Vulnerability in this space would be very intriguing.
Especially like the notions, like the various things that have been spoken about, vulnerability and how it ties to authenticity, makes those two especially obvious as things to jump out at.
Yeah, because if like vulnerability, like if a state's subject is vulnerable, it compromises their ability to be instrumentalized and to be a cog in a system.
If you have feelings and you are worried about fulfilling those feelings, either the machine has to find a way to facilitate you, or you stop being useful once this consumes your work. And playing with that would also be very intriguing. So yeah. Next,
Do we want two there, or just the one?
if the way that it was discussed and the way that it just kind of lines up with everything else is very unique in that it already begs a great deal of authenticity, such that that is technically already its second, without me asking much more of that question because of how it ties to everything else, which is very unique about these questions. I'm seeing ways in which they plug into each other and already ask or answer future questions, which is really neat. So, next. We who breach the barrier of dreams. Why do we wander in others' dreams? To uncover truths that others ignore? To help those whom society has forsaken? To escape the tedium of our day-to-day lives? To understand our waking lives? To banish the ghosts of our past? Or to experience real intimacy?
Is this speaking about the crew, or is it about people in general in this particular worldscape that we're building?
It would be referring to you all, the PCs.
Okay.
No one else, very few people, if anyone, has the ability that you will have. So this is describing specifically you all. Why did you get into this thing?
I think there's a case for intimacy where essentially the waking world is so focused on artifice and masks that the subconscious is the only place anyone takes those off.
I think so too. I was just thinking about what I would try to build my character around, and I think their motivations, if they go in the direction that I'm thinking, it would fall most cleanly under the broader umbrella of intimacy. So yes, I agree with that.
Also, it means that we're essentially making, like, one of the binary delineations that we're making between the real world and the dream is essentially between like one's true intentions and the face that they put on in the public world, and that you seek dreams primarily because it gives you the opportunity not only to see someone else for who they are, but to give them yourself as you truly are. Um,
So I'd love to make a pitch to also include to help those whom society has forsaken. Because if everyone is game with that, that for me instantly creates more of a shape to what this crew is and why this crew is. Now, maybe we don't have to do that one, but we're kind of on the edge of thinking about the characters and their relationships to each other. And when I was first like looking at In a Maze of Dreams, I was not super into it because it felt less empathy, compassion-y, like optimism, heroism-y. I've changed that view, especially as like Brandon was describing their view or their kind of take on the playset. But this is a specific place where if we're all interested, we can basically put a marker down about what we want from this series and what we want these characters to be about.
I think it might turn into one of these like persona-y things where we're going into the dream space to essentially reunite people with their true selves in a way. Like, we are excavating the authenticity of you from under all this crap.
Yeah. And now you get why Persona 4 and Persona 5 were two of my personal touchstones. Aha.
Dream archaeology social workers is like phenomenal.
Yeah, pretty much. And like
a mummy, but with feelings.
So I guess like a thing worth considering as we go into the next question as a result is that question, why do we wander in others' dreams, is framed as if to imply, obviously because the game implies this kind of energy of starting from season 2, that you have done this before and you already have a reason for continuing to do this, which begs the question as a result. You got to this, were given the power to enter the dream the first time, perhaps on accident or through the machinations of another character, or found yourself in your own dream at some point and found a way to not only get back out but get back in. But what was the reason that you decided to do it the second time is a worthy question to ask as you fall into what is the following question, which is, what role do you play? Each protagonist choose one or two. Forbidden lover, best friend, reformed conspirator, disillusioned cynic, tragic genius, wary caretaker, object of desire, oracle of the dream, target of the conspiracy.
Can we put a pin in this one and come back to it during character creation? Because I think this is going to be strongly informed by our playbook choices.
I mean, it directly informs the playbook choice that one will make, but we can definitely follow that up after we get to some other things. But now that I've stated it, you have time to think about it as well. Next, how do we pass our days? Mind-numbing repetition, boredom and despair, isolation and detachment, grueling dirty work, fruitless labor, or morally compromising jobs.
Anyone else notice that every item on that list was a synonym for capitalism?
I was about to say, you really have to attack my job like this?
So everybody's daily life every day?
Mm-hmm. You just need to figure out which part of it sucks more. Is it the work? Is it not being respected for the work? Is it not being paid well for the work? Is it that the work itself is just sucky and uncomfortable? Is it that it doesn't align with your values? What part of capitalism irks you the most?
We really can't do all of the above.
Yeah, I'm noticing that it says on the sheet that we actually should now switch to selecting playbooks. So I just realized it's under what role do you play. Then it says instruct each protagonist to select a playbook. So maybe.
Yeah, so
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
it might make
Okay.
sense
Chat, we
to
have
step back and
missed-
then, yeah, just do those together, right?
Okay, fair enough. So I guess we'll return to that question then.
Do any of these roles jump out to anybody?
I'm hesitating the urge to become a teacher and start selecting people by name.
So the one that I would be interested in taking is the Outsider, but also I am not hyper attached to it. I'm totally fine taking something else that would better play off of somebody, because that's kind of the main focus of this campaign that I would like to lean into. Like for Cindered Seal, we're all kind of feeling out our characters as like the sessions went on. We didn't really come into the game with like, this is who we are going to be, this is how we're going to play off of each other, this is how our characters are going to develop. So like with this built-in planning step, I would, as long as I am able to kind of build the character alongside someone else, to be like, okay, I want to be your foil, you can be mine. As long as there's that element for me, I'm okay with any other playbook. It's just that for the Outsider, it just seems to be like the most obvious, because you literally have to pick a rival, and like that's the easiest way to be a foil to somebody else.
Do you already have a sense of what role from that series question would best align with those goals as well?
For me, that would depend on who I'm playing off of, because I don't want to take something and then the person that I've chosen to be the rival ends up taking something that doesn't quite initially mesh that well.
Okay.
Of course, the playbook does specify that, like, if you can lose a rival and then you have to pick another one. So that's not to say that everybody would have to pick roles that mesh well with mine. It's just that for at least that first rival, I would like it to be like an ideal kind of foil situation.
Okay.
Again, if I end up taking Outsider. If it ends up not meshing well with the kind of crew that we want to make, I'm totally fine picking something else.
Cool.
I'd be really interested in playing the Time Traveler. I feel like when we did Case of the Cindered Seal, I fell into the trap of being more reactive than active, and Time Traveler is a role that requires taking more initiative. In which case, I think the clearest link to a role would probably be Oracle of the Dream.
So, do you want to be from the past or the future, and or some other axis?
Ooh.
Because if we're delving into history, then
I mean, if we're delving into history, we can still go both ways. Because you can either be from you can either be from the past that the history is already informed by, or a past that the history has totally blown past and never experienced, or a future where the consequences of this going poorly have already been wrought. Like, all of those things are possible.
Or, again, drawing from the folkloric idea, you were briefly out of time, you came back and way more time elapsed than you expected. Or you were briefly out of time, you had an entire life that passed by that was not what it should have been, quote unquote. And now you've like returned to it right where you left, and you're like, wait a minute.
And if you were out of time in the dream space, like dream time passing very differently is a very reasonable thing, and it would also potentially make you better acquainted with the dream to serve as an oracle in that sense. Like your ability to understand and interpret the dream logic of things, to understand dream geography would potentially be impacted. So
I think it makes more sense to either be out of time and stuck in the dream, or preventing the bad end, or a mix of these two. I am always very invested in the idea of, yep, this is fucked, I'm going to go back and fix it and make it not happen.
Nice. So either Chibiusa or which one was the Sailor
A
Senshi
little
who
bit.
had
No.
weird, curious time powers?
Was it Saturn or Pluto?
I think it
Was
was
she
Pluto.
tiny or was
I-
she tall?
Tall. I think it was Pluto. Can't
Pluto.
recall. It's been so long
Dark-
since I've
dark
watched Sailor
area.
Moon.
Pluto could
Long,
do weird
dark
stuff with
hair.
time. I think it's Pluto.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, I dig that a lot.
I mean, Brandon, yes, that, but also a little tiny bit Mari Makinami illustrious vibes.
Yes, I dig this a lot. Of course I would like that. Of course I want Mari in my game. It's me. But yes. Mike, what are your thoughts?
I'm weighing either one and or the other of Tragic Genius and Target of the Conspiracy, which would probably be like somebody who is doing a thing that could challenge the status quo, but not in the direction that the conspiracy wants.
Ooh, that would be
'cause-
intriguing. And I mean, you
'cause
can do both.
Because something I was thinking is like I had for a number of years I would just have a like, here are ideas I want to play with, written on a whiteboard. I have erased that whiteboard, but then I copied everything over. And one of the names is Who Stole the Future. And so the idea would be, and this maybe would create a good character relationship with Yori's character, somebody articulating a vision of a future that is anathema to both the conspiracy and the status quo. And so to be Tragic Genius, because how could you ever succeed if you're arrayed against both of those?
Okay.
This
This
is
would
giving
be
me very
very
Cassandra
convenient.
from Troy vibes, like somebody who is doomed to know the future and never be believed.
Mm-hmm.
Because she doesn't predict the future; she knows the future. That's the difference.
It would be very convenient for me personally if Mike played a character along these lines, because I have the trait Fated. You traveled through time to change another protagonist's fate. What perilous fate are you here to prevent? Whose fate is it? Yours, apparently, Mike.
That
So
seems very possible.
So then, what, like, do you have a role then that is defined by your relationship to that character?
That bears thinking about.
I see. Okay, duly noted. Because I'm intrigued to see how both of those things play off of each other, because it means that you're both describing characters whose roles are defined by already knowing some portion of the future, but for someone else. And I'd love to see what that looks like in play. Valerie, what are your thoughts?
So I came into this with a lot of different character ideas that were also sort of dependent on where other people wanted to go. Depending on which one we end up with, probably the most likely options would be best friend, reformed conspirator, or disillusioned cynic. So I feel like any of those I can make align with what the other characters are going to be playing as. And in terms of the actual playbook, I'm leaning towards either Enigma or unlikely hero, depending on which way we go with that.
Ooh. Unlikely hero. I mean, Unlikely Hero has a lot of dramatic energy tied up into it, very obviously. But especially in this kind of framework is very cool.
It might work better for Mike's character, depending on how we arrange things. So, yeah, I feel like it could go either way, yeah.
Cool. Noted. Does that give you, Yoi, any clearer sense of what role you think you can play with?
May I have the list again, please? Because I cannot seem to find it in the rulebook that I am currently scrolling.
It's on the playsheet's PDF document if you have access to that.
Playsheet PDF.
Which would be page 19.
Page 19.
And the list, as I read it out again for all of the other lovely people in chat who cannot see this document. Forbidden lover, best friend, reformed conspirator, disillusioned cynic, tragic genius, wary caretaker, object of desire, oracle of the dream, or target of the conspiracy.
I think disillusioned cynic or wary caretaker would be interesting to play with, just as someone like building off of this playbook that necessarily has a lot of conflicting energy against the other characters by nature of being a rival. So like taking that concept and melding it with someone who is disillusioned and like just mentally exhausted / wary, and or somebody who is self-appointed or appointed by others to take care of others, but at the same time is in conflict with them constantly for like their own internal reasons. I think either of those would be really interesting to use with the Outsider playbook.
Okay. That would be very intriguing, I think. Especially from the lens of wary caretaker attached to the rival, there is this sense of, I don't like this, but if anyone's gonna do it, it's still gonna be me. Which is...
the idea of, like, antagonism made beneficial is kind of where I was going with it, where nobody gets to fight with these people except me. So by nature of that, everything else has to be kept away from, like, this group that this character considers their own.
Cool. So, just to be sure then, as a repetition of, if this has already given everybody a playbook that they'd like to play with. Iori, did you pick a playbook?
Time Traveler.
Time Traveler. And Yoi is Rival. Mike, did you pick a playbook?
I haven't. I am
The
leaning...
playbook's name, just to interject, is The Outsider. The Rival is...
right, Outsider, right.
The Rival is what you call the person that you're picking as a rival on your sheet.
I should have just scrolled up on the document, but I didn't. My brain just did a thing. Apologies.
My apologies for interrupting. Mike, back to you.
Yes, Mike.
No worries. I'm leaning Enigma or possibly Guardian. Valerie, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm again either Enigma or Unlikely Hero, I think. And so if you want to do Enigma, I'll do Unlikely Hero. And if you want to do Guardian, then I still don't know what I'm doing.
Enigma does, like, mechanically have some crossover with Ring from Cindered Seal, so if you wanted to branch out a little, maybe not Enigma for you, Mike?
Yeah, I think the upside of Enigma would be, like, character coming to understand that they are, like, persona non grata, and therefore being able to do, like, magic sleight of hand might give them more survivability. But like Guardian would be for the like paladin version of this character.
I see. So I take it then that you're settling on Enigma?
I'm still torn. I should probably decide. Let me look at the. I'm gonna look at the special abilities again real quick. Yeah, I'll be the tank. I'll go Guardian.
I see. Noted.
A tank Ring!
And Valerie, that means that you will be...
Yeah, I could still be either now because, yeah. I feel like either could be good. Does anyone have a compelling argument between Enigma and Unlikely Hero? As in, for example, I could say an unlikely hero would benefit from having a guardian, for example. And then the unlikely hero would potentially be the person the time traveler was trying to change their fate, because that's the one that usually gets shunted into being the hero character.
Yeah, and if you're the unlikely hero, were you the unlikely hero all through season 1?
Or, as we've previously discussed,
we had talked about,
we
yes.
had Brandon. So potentially that would make Enigma a better. We'll let Brandon drop this one, but that might make Enigma a better option, because then, yeah.
Aha.
It could be argued that due to reasons, Valerie, your character took a class change.
Yes. You had greatness thrust upon you.
The interesting thing of the unlikely hero is that it does it has a literal class change built into it, which is really cool. And that is something that, yeah, as a lover of Sailor Moon, it's always fun to have that moment of transcendence, as we will talk about the actual transcendence type stuff in a bit. But Enigma is also a deeply fun option. I feel like if we already have a time traveler who potentially is enigmatic, then having 2 Enigmas maybe is not ideal. So I might. All right. I think have we talked me into Unlikely Hero, or were we trying to talk me into being Enigma because of the chat reason?
I mean, either one would really
it can
work.
go either way, narratively.
I think both work.
Which one would be more fun?
Okay, Valerie,
I think?
flip a coin.
Remind me what role. What series role you were thinking about?
Series role, as in, so I had pulled up as 2 possibilities, reformed conspirator and disillusioned cynic.
Right.
Yeah, and so it could be, but depending on which way I go with this, it could be target of the conspiracy, it could be best friend. Yeah, it could go a lot of different ways.
Due to reasons, both of those things do work. But I will say, if you still need a devil on your shoulder, I will say, because of reasons, Unlikely Hero works best for our purposes when we get to that point when I discuss
and we'll
the
do
thing.
Okay, then I'll go with Unlikely Hero. Sounds good.
Okay. Noted. And with that, we continue. As I scroll all the way down this PDF. So we should return to the capitalism question. And I will ask playbook questions about like your actions and stuff like that later on, but I want to finish these questions first. So how do we pass our days? And I guess in particular I will focus that question by saying, what is the part about capitalism that upsets you all the most?
Does this answer have to be the same for everybody? Like, are we as a crew united in the same thing that makes us all very deeply happy about mundane existence, or can each character select a different reason?
Right, because this frames our obligation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this will indeed frame your obligation. So, I do want to hear what is essentially the version of that thing that bothers you all individually. But this question is also, in terms of the series itself, a sense of what is the worst thing writ large about capitalism in this space, Excuse me. I'm dying. So I do want to hear what is the thing that matters to you personally, as a kind of offshoot to all of these questions. But as it is written, as far as I can see, it is on a series level the thing that is stand out about that answer for not even just necessarily all four of you, but the world overall. I'm dying.
I think. Oh, sorry, Mike.
Oh, just in earlier discussions, we were talking about wanting everybody to be implicated in kind of the dystopia, which for me would gesture toward morally compromising jobs.
Aha. Okay. Considering all of the other observations that we've made about the world so far, do you have any idea, just off the bat, not about the work itself, but what makes it morally compromising?
Possibly the ways in which we are forced to hide or lie about ourselves and our inclinations.
Ah. I see.
Something else that could pull on the idea of ritual being one of the cornerstones of the world that we are building. Something about tedium, or like the slow, dull grind of the same thing constantly happening over and over, might be something interesting to play with.
Mm-hmm. So I do imagine that will play into the space overall regardless. So thank you for reminding me of that. So the next question, which is not bold, and I'm not sure if that's for a reason. I'm assuming that it is for a reason. How does the world see us if it notices us at all? And that's a free-form question. So I'd like to hear from your character's perspective what that answer might look like, based on what we know so far.
Is this like what we do, or literally what we look like, or?
I mean, I want to assume that the question is phrased in the way that it is because those things are layered and intersectional. It can be a matter of your physical body and things that are tied to your body, like gender identity and sexuality and race. It can be about work. It can be about the person that people imagine you to be outside of work. It can be an assumption about your values, an assumption about the things that matter to you. It can be, as far as I can imagine for this process, as simple as whether the world at large views you as a trustworthy or untrustworthy person, a good or bad person, a nice or mean person. Because all of those things are very weird and very hostile all of the time. For want of a better way of describing it, this question is the Nextdoor app question. If one of your neighbors had Nextdoor on their phone, what do you think they're saying about you? God, that's phrased so hostile, and I'm so very sorry. But that's what it is.
I think there might be a sense of the characters as stuck cogs in the machine, where failure to conform is taken as an affront and a failure to participate properly in society. Essentially, the characters would be seen as friction points by other people around them.
Mm-hmm. But not in the rebellious sense, but in the failure to launch sense.
I mean, I think that will vary for the individual characters.
Ah, okay. Fair.
And how hard each of the characters tries to conform in the waking world is going to vary as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, are we all are we all on performance plans from capitalism? Where we are, like, on the edge or possibly on the vector to become those whom society has forsaken.
Mm-hmm.
I think
there might be some of that energy, yeah.
I think maybe the clearest way to describe it would be like everybody is a little bit uncanny valley, but that variable of uncanny valley kind of varies obviously from character to character. Like, the characters and the members of the crew, they all fit, quote unquote, more or less into like the grander scheme of what the waking world demands of them, but there's something just a bit off that can't quite be articulated, but there's something just a bit funny about them.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who just, like, lives that life, yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
There's that indefinable something that makes the other people around you think, oh, this one's not quite a person. Not by my standards, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and, like, drawing from personal experience, that can either make you super invisible, or it can make you super visible. So, like, the weird thing I was thinking for my character, at least, is that they're not perceived. And that kind of lends itself to the idea of, like, yeah, they're never around, but I can't really put my finger on when they're never around. Because they're actually always there, but you just don't perceive them as existing because there's something a bit off.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, going back to the folklore thing, there's so many conflicting traditions about what you do when you see, like, something spooky. So some traditions say, like, oh, you should acknowledge the ghost, you should speak to it, and other ones are very much against that. Like, no, you must never acknowledge it at all, because that's how you give it power to, you know, mess you up. So, again, very interesting to look at.
Yeah, I think that a lot. Like, to hazard this analogy that I hate, it's the social equivalent of all of the round pegs looking at you and going, so you look round, but you also look like somebody had to shave a bit off in order for you to fit. But you fit, so that's all that matters to me.
You look round, but really you look round because you're standing just right in this angle of light, and you're just, like, constantly turning a little bit, so you always look round.
Okay, so, next. The dream is a personal reflection of the waking world. What is the dream to you?
So to clarify, we're going with the dream as a quasi-sentient, if not sentient, being that's dreaming of itself and interacting somehow with a conspiracy to do a thing that we don't know of. That's what we're going with, right?
So, this is layered in terms of the way that I'm approaching, like, actually answering that question. In that, there is the dream that you're currently engaging with, which is the conspiracy. And then there is the dream as the act of dreaming, which is morally neutral. Whether you solve or do not solve this problem, getting in and out of a dream is the exact same. For the purposes of this question, if that makes sense, I'm thinking of that. What is the dreamscape as a morally neutral object to you? Free. What can it be free from the conspiracy? What can it be as your capacity to enter into it, if that makes sense? this is the part where if Andrew um, has strong feelings about that read of mine, I should be very strongly corrected in chat. But I want to believe that I'm seeing something here.
So I think what's interesting about this is the way that it's going to be personal for the characters, because as I was thinking about this question and as I'm conceiving of an unlikely hero type character, I feel like the dream space for, I think it's going to be her, I think we'll go with her, is going to be, I think, a place where she feels sort of, she achieves occasional bursts of agency, if that makes sense, where, like in some dreams, it feels like the dream is happening to you. And in some dreams, it feels like you are affecting the course of the dream. And so I think for her, until she changes from the one form to the other, so to speak, it's going to be a thing where she, in the dream, is much more of a passive observer or passive participant who is potentially here with these other characters and knows them. And as far as she's concerned, these are other characters in her dreams. But I think that her agency is still limited, and she experiences the dream as much more of a regular person and much less of a transcended alter ego, at least initially. So I feel like for her, it is a movie or a video game that she is an NPC in initially.
So to clarify, oh, sorry.
Nope, continue.
So to clarify, in this portion of the dream that is free of the conspiracy, are we intending the characters in this conspiracy-free space to be who they are without conflict, or who they are, like, authentically, or because I'm struggling a little bit with, like, what a conspiracy-free space means, strictly speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
So,
are we taking the pressure? Because I understand that within the dream, like, the pressures of the waking world have vanished more or less because it is this dream space, but I'm not quite sure what it means to, like, take the weight of the conspiracy away from it.
Mm-hmm. So, in a way, the thing that I am asking is, there is still a value to the dreamscape that has only been corrupted as a result of the conspiracy. Because the dream can be corrupted by it. But because you can enter the dreamscape, it means that you also are aware of that value, even if that value is potential, even if that value is rare or fleeting for you, and even if stating that value also means confirming that you are doing the work that you are doing in order to reclaim that value, if that makes sense. So at that point, I'm asking, what is that value? Because you wouldn't clean up the dream if there wasn't the potential for that value. You could just drink 10-hour energy and never sleep again, which I do not recommend, but...
I think for my character, dreaming is how they achieve, like, some measure of internal peace. Like, they swing very hard between entering the space and suddenly feeling like the weight of their own internal conflict and agitation kind of lifted from them.
Mm-hmm.
Or they go there and, like when you're dreaming and you're looking for something, but you're not sure what it is, but you know it's not here, so you keep looking and you keep looking and you keep looking and you keep looking, and then there's something in your way and you have to get rid of it. Like, I kind of see, like, the character as it's taking shape as like someone who's very agitated, and uncorrupted dream space is where, like, the constant engine of their brain can kind of go, for once. Like, they can just kind of stop for a bit, and it's all fine. It's all cool. They can just be for a moment. But, like, it's very fleeting for them, that piece.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Duly noted. Iori, what stands out to you?
I'm sort of thinking of the conspiracy as a spreading corruption within the dream, so that there may still be some oases of like uncorrupted space or uninfected space that are becoming fewer and farther between as we go on.
Ah. Okay.
So there might still be essentially like pockets of a surviving history that have not been entirely squashed or erased by the dominant narrative.
Ah. So does that mean then that in those spaces there is a sense of witnessing the past purely that you are engaging with primarily because it is more true or more honest than whatever you can find outside of that space?
I don't think there is a objectively pure or honest past.
Mm-hmm.
For my character personally, I think that the value of the dream would be kind of a release valve from pressures in her waking world. Being able to wear a more honest face and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back to perhaps there was a time when it would have been possible to be this person in the waking world. And maybe there is a future where that is going to be possible.
Okay. I like that a lot. And Mike. What is the dream to you?
I'm writing a fan note in the chat because I love the guided list model for world building. I think the dream for me is potential. It is like a half sidestep in like within which people can imagine possibility outside of the always already overwhelming stimuli that create constraints and conformity. So like the dream is like a revolutionary heterotopia.
Aha.
Because I might as well be all the way on my bullshit.
Of course. We're writers. That's what we're here for. Okay. I'm going to like digging all of those holes for you all very soon. Next. And this will be very unique. These are the questions that I'm very fascinated for the answers for, in terms of describing how you travel through space, which is, how do we know when we are in the dream? No Inception stuff, though.
No Inception stuff. I'm going to jump in and I'm going to say, for my character's purposes at the beginning of the game at least, I think that she knows she's in the dream because she sees one of the other people one of our PCs. Like that will be her clear signpost, or one of the symbolic representations that she has come to associate with them. And so for her, being still in a more like passive agency-less type state, despite the second season nature of this, I think that for her is the signpost. Is, oh, I see one of my friends and they only show up when I'm dreaming, or, oh, I see one of the symbols of my friends, ergo I must be in the dream.
Aha. So that okay. I'm curious about that in particular. I guess I'm also curious whether there is a non-physical a non other human being resource for that discovery. In part because um, it would be a hell of a lot if you became trapped with the assumption that maybe this person is in fact my friend. Nope, they're part of this dream as well.
It can be an NPC who is hostile or helpful. I can absolutely accept that. Speaking of Paprika, it would be like, oh, she sees a blue butterfly, and she's like, aha, I am no longer awake because that is not a thing that exists in my day-to-day real world.
Aha, I see. Those butterflies, though.
What if there's silence or lack along one of the sensory axes in a way that there is not in the waking world because of media saturation? Like, is that an angle to go on?
Like, you know how neon
I
makes
love
a
this
sound?
idea.
But you can't hear it in the dream.
Uh-huh.
I love this a lot. Like in the waking world, there's a pressure, whether that is whether it is physical pressure or it is a psychic pressure of like the mortifying reality of being known. And so in the dream, like your ears pop, but like spiritually.
Yeah, I like that as well. And I mean, I also like the idea of, like, in this kind of strange kind of meta sense, because you are no longer quote unquote in your body. Your relationship to your senses are warped in a way that you immediately discover because you are trying to interact with a body that is not made of meat. Ah, it appeared. Meat. It's finally made its appearance, Yoi.
I was actually about to say that the way I would be really interested in playing with is for my character at least, like there is that physical sensation of a vanished pressure, but in the dream they no longer feel physical pain. I like the idea of, like, as their mundane self, they are somebody who has some kind of chronic condition, so where they're always in a kind of low-grade, constant pain that occasionally spikes, but once they fall into the dream world, that pain ceases. And that's how they always know, oh, I'm dreaming now, because I'm no longer in my physical body, which is constantly trying to kill me.
Uh-huh. That would be very curious as well. Or, So there's a way that I want to play with that, and I want to obviously open by like asking you all to qualify whether that makes sense or not, or whether you are comfortable with it or not. Of also playing with the opposite version of that, if that makes sense, where the potential comforts and relaxations that you already have or can find in the real world are actually lacking in the dream, or can be lacking in the dream. That, for instance, in much the same way that you can tell that it is much quieter, much less busy, not as physically oppressive in the dream, because you can feel those sensations in the real world. If a thing makes you feel comfortable or soothes you, it has the potential to either give you no sensation or at all, or in order to get that sensation from the dream, you actually have to start thinking about it or forcing it to, and that's when you realize, hey, and if I have to tell my pillow to be soft, maybe this is a dream.
Yeah, food is my first touchstone for that. The ability or inability to taste food in a dream. Personally, I can't taste food in a dream, and so that would be a thing that would make sense to me. That it's like, oh, here's this whole Pan's Labyrinth style banquet, and instead of it necessarily turning into something horrifying or bad, it's just this apple has no flavor. and it lacks the appropriate texture of an apple or something like that. Just something that is very clearly definably this sense is not working. Yeah, no, I can't taste food in dreams, which I'm not saying that's for everybody, but
I mean, I'm in the same boat.
I
didn't know people
can.
were eating in it. You eat in your dreams?
Yes, I can. Once I had a dream about a burger that was so good that when my roommate woke me up from that dream, I held enough of a grudge that he had to take me out for lunch and get me a burger to replace the one he had taken away from me by waking me up.
But then what's also interesting is that if we start from a place where, for example, you can't taste the food in the dreams, if you get to a point where you do have like a really amazing burger and you're like, wait a minute, this is definitely a dream. How is it possible that I can taste this? Then that's a really cool sort of contamination / infection moment that can occur. Along the line. So having that sort of thing shift as we go is really interesting.
Yeah, like I like the idea of playing on the continuum of that, because it means not only that you cannot rely on someone else's information to assure you where you are, but you can be in a position where you have to be deliberate about the information that you want to get from the world in order to be sure.
Also thinking about that, okay, let's go back to we're going back to my childhood. The Batman the Animated Series episode where he is stuck in the dream world, and his first clue, his first major clue is that he can't read any of the books, that they are all just like weird swaths of nonsense words, because you can't read in dreams, which is another thing that I imagine some people can. But something like that, where it's like, if the character likes to read and reaches for a book in a dream and is like, I can't focus on this, I'm struggling, that could be another sign. So
yeah, which those are like visual things that I also plan to touch on as well. Like recognizing faces in dreams is something that I'm definitely going to play a lot with, because I like the idea of you trying to determine who you're talking to and just seeing void. But we'll get to that point when we play, of course.
There's also something to be said for if the real world, quote unquote, is so overwhelming in terms of sensory input that maybe the dream world is in itself not actually devoid of that input, but when you go into the dream space, you're just so bombarded and overloaded that it actually takes a while for feeling to come back. So or perceptions to come back. So just because suddenly you're able to taste something or suddenly you're able to hear something doesn't necessarily mean you're out of dream space. It just means you've been separated from the waking world long enough that you can now perceive things going on around you independently.
Like night vision, or if you've been in the dark and you go outside into the sunlight.
Yeah. So
good.
Yeah, for my character, it would be something like, oh, I can feel all these other senses coming back, but the one that doesn't come back for me is bodily pain. I don't ever feel that in a dream. So as long as I don't feel that, I know I'm dreaming. That kind of thing.
Aha. Okay. I dig that a lot. So, next question. How do we navigate the dream? And for those purposes, I'm also going to include how do you get from the waking world into the dream? Which I'm pretty sure that's what it means, but I want to make that overt, because that's the thing that matters to me as the stage manager of this game.
Yeah, again, I'll go first just because I think for my character, initially at least, it's going to be the mundane form of going to sleep, because I think that, again, like her initial, unlikely hero-ness is going to involve primarily not having the same kinds of access that the other characters are going to have. But I think that as that changes, I know we had previously discussed just notions of like portals, doors, windows, and I'm starting to lean towards this computer doing it through screens. TV screens, computer screens, phone screens.
So one thing I'd like to clarify, when we go into dream space, do we physically go into dream space, or is like our body still in waking space, vaguely unconscious or on autopilot, so to speak, while the mind is off gallivanting somewhere?
Ah, that's a very good question.
So the conspiracy seeks to shatter that barrier. If the conspiracy has succeeded, that question will no longer be relevant because the two will be one, which implies that there is a barrier, which implies some kind of crossing. But the question of like astral projection versus like crossing over and no longer having physicality is not determined by that, right?
It's like there is a kind of poetry to either answer. If you are your dream self in the dreamscape, then it means that your ability to transcend is just this stronger, more concrete version of yourself that you can manifest in dreams lucidly, which is a feat in itself. But if you can bring your whole body with you, then it means that everything that you do in the dream is a feat. So either of those things are good at illustrating exactly how spectacular it is that you have this ability in the first place. Neither of them are superior to each other in that sense.
Yeah, we just affected the logistics of it in terms of like, if we are physically going into the dream space with our bodies, then we do not have to worry about protecting the bodies that we have left behind. Like if the dream space, if time in the dream space passes differently such that, for example, if one of our characters is at work and they have to go to the dream space, if they have to literally fall asleep to do it, is their body going to be sitting at their desk or the cafe or something asleep and able to be impacted, or do they have to literally go into the dream space, and if they come back out, how long has it been since they've been in there? Does time pass in an equal way, or do they come out at the same instant they left? Or it's like there are a lot of logistics that would be involved in either manifestation.
I suggest, because we are starting from season 2, that in season 1 everybody could like fall asleep and go into the dream world that way, and then partway through the arc of season 1 we gain the ability to physically go into season 2. That was kind of everybody's leveling up, so that now in season 2 we have both available to us, and we can figure out the logistics on the fly in flashbacks, pretending that we've already figured it out before.
Okay. What unconscious tell accompanies each of us throughout the dream?
Sorry, I missed the process of navigation or means of navigation answer.
I remember
Maps.
Valerie mentioned like traveling through liminal objects like reflections in mirrors or screens, passing through doorways, etc.
And that's also in the dream, when we are in the dream?
That's that's actually a very interesting option. Is it possible that you leave a dream differently than when you enter it? Like, do you have to do a thing in order to wake up?
I'm also thinking just like we are in the dream. How do we get around?
Do we fly? Do we walk?
Do we fly?
Do we have transportation?
Yeah. Are there like, is it like a fantasy thing where there's like there are safer and less safe pathways? Do you have to, is it like old, like cyberspace where you have to find this, okay, where we are, I'm going to find the symbol of the place that I want to go to, and then we interact with that symbol, and then we are there.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the idea of pathways that have different levels of safety. I would kind of like to be able to get through it by gliding, just like ice skating without the skates, so that we get to sample some of the gorgeous or strange or surreal scenery around us.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of ritual as a means of travel, to borrow that from the waking world foundational aspect.
So one of the things that I will say that I'm leaning into on an image perspective as stage manager is the idea that traveling requires its own level of dream logic that you already have because you have done this before. Um, that in, like, you know how in a dream where you will cut as if it were a scene from a television show or a movie and just travel through space via that cut, even though the distance between where you were in the first scene and where you start moving in the second scene is actually vastly huge.
I feel like that could actually be something personal to the characters, and that might be fun because then we can kind of go through all of those different methods. Where for one person it might be the cut method, where it's like a wipe, just like whoop, and you're there, and it's like, wait, what?
Yeah, that each of you takes the rest of the crew with you in a certain manner, but it's not the manner that anyone's accustomed to because that's not how
Yeah.
you do it on your own.
But then, for example, like my character could do it that way, and then Mike's character, it could be a matter of like, oh, okay, you find the object, like he said, that is representative of the place that you want to go, like in a hidden objects game kind of thing, where you're looking around and you're like, all right, I need to find, oh, there it is, it's the mushroom, and that mushroom will take us to the place that we need to go. And whatever the object is could imply what you do with it. Like if it's an edible thing, you eat it. If it's a doorway, you walk through it. If it's a path, you follow it. So yeah, there can be other kinds of dream logic, but I also love the idea of like Yuri's idea of being able to physically travel on, like, flight is a pretty common dream thing, and so some sort of manifestation of that. It could be something faster. It could be like 7 League Boots, where it's like, yes, every step is a lot of steps equivalent, but it still is steps. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Making you all move through the dream is going to be a lot of fun now all of a sudden. Thank you so very much for that. What unconscious tell accompanies each of us throughout the dream?
Like a physical tick?
I want to say it could be of your dream body or that it comes from the world. I'm much more fascinated by what comes through the world, but I want you to be able to imagine your own body through that same lens as well.
The first thing that came to mind is like some kind of music, but then I was also thinking of having my character be a teacher and therefore tell like the smell of chalk.
That would be really neat. I'm gonna ask questions about your character when you learn more about your character, but I'm suddenly very intrigued by, so what I will say then that I think will help that process very much is that tell can be a thing that matters to you for good or for ill. That is a part of your subconscious that is not only visible for you but visible for other people. So consider like what it may potentially reveal about your inner character to other characters and how you might feel about the fact that it can be revealed, and see how that informs the decision that you make. Valerie, what stands out to
Yeah,
you?
no, so
Gears are
again,
turning, I can see.
Yeah, yeah. Can you see what my face says? I think it might be really interesting because I'm starting to lean towards an office worker type for my character, and so I think it would be interesting for her tell to be that her hair is loose and sort of swimming, like she's underwater. Because I feel like in her day-to-day life, she probably keeps it very like prim, pulled back in a bun, professional style. And so to have it be not just loose but floating would probably be a way of like, oh, she's in this dream world. But in terms of a tell for other characters, I think maybe like a ringtone, as stupid as that sounds. Because it's so mundane. Again, it's just like, oh, here she is. It's just a little ringtone when she arrives, like Mike was saying, like a song.
Depending on the setting, it could even be like the sound of like the notification tone that plays in a station when the train pulls in to let everyone know there's a train coming, like something from her commute or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the sound when you're trying to make a phone call to certain systems where it's like a burp 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 burp.
Yeah. Oh Lord. Capitalism is going to ruin us. Oh Lord.
Oh, or that horrible hold music. Oh, sorry.
Just play like all the Mass Effect 1 elevator music for your entrances.
Noted. Oh God.
Yeah, like elevator music, something like that, exactly.
Oh Lord.
So, me being me, am pulling from like the Matrix or something, like just the appearance of an animal, like a rabbit, the white rabbit. It's like the easiest thing to reach for, or a bird. Ha ha ha! Look, I did it.
Mark it on the bingo cards, folks.
Talked about birds, because there are a lot of birds that are heralds of ill omens or heralds of something coming. So there's a lot to pick from there. But something that ties more, I guess, more deeply to the character itself, I guess, would be if the character is entering dream space where other people already exist. You actually don't ever see them enter, quote unquote. It's the very classic you look over and they're there. Suddenly, to kind of pull from the idea of like in mundane life, they're just kind of glazed over as just like another cog in the machine. They're never actually perceived, more or less. And so that translates into the dream space when they enter. Like nobody ever actually sees them enter the dream space. It's just, oh, how long have you been there? Beats me. So that's the other direction I kind of go with.
I see. You said the thing and then a bird thing happened in my brain. That I dig a lot. But I like the ideas that you have I like everything that you've just described very much. And next we will get into avatar things, as well as some setting and other character stuff that I had specially prepared for our strange friends this evening. And hopefully, I don't want to take too much time because this is it. I know that this is typically kind of later than we usually do, but hopefully, we will get everything wrapped up very soon. But before then, I would like very much for everyone to take a 10-minute break. And this is a reminder to everyone in the chat as well that a break for us on screen is a break for you all as well. So if you would like to get something to eat or drink, stretch, or do all of the other things that you must do to keep your body healthy, please do those things. And we will be back in about 10 minutes with more Session 0 prep for the case of this well, nope, that's not what we're calling it again. Oh my god, this happens in my brain all the time. When you get accustomed to saying a thing aloud, it just kind of happens in your head. But yes, we will be back with more of Session 0 of Girl by Moonlight in just a little bit. So please stay tuned. And we are back with more of tonight's session 0 of Girl by Moonlight. We are still answering series questions as we get to learn more about the dream, the conspiracy, and the characters who will potentially undo that conspiracy. So, when last we spoke, we were still describing the dream and how we enter into that space. And we are back. Let me just make sure I'm not hearing myself. Because I was briefly hearing myself. Okay, cool. So I just want to go over the last question again before we continue, which is, what unconscious tell accompanies each of us throughout the dream? Because another thing had occurred to us in private conversation that I was just briefly reminded of, and I wanted to consider broaching that possibility aloud with you all, which was, are you a version of your ideal self in the dream?
For my character, at least, I don't think so. Mostly because I don't see them necessarily knowing what that idealized self is, or even caring really what that is, because they frame how they exist as like something oppositional to other people.
I think we need to determine if it is possible to be in the dreaming and not be your avatar self. For my character, I know that their avatar self is going to look and manifest very differently than their mundane self. So I'm wondering if the mundane self is carried into the dream at first, and it's only when we transcend and see the avatar that it's changing. And if we're determining tells to work out if the waking self is in the dream or not.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me, that that our dream selves can still have variety, right? Like, thinking back to Paprika, it's like, there's obviously the character has the waking self and the dream self, but even the dream self has different manifestations. Paprika goes through a lot of different form changes, outfits, and literal form manipulation. But like, the transcendence, like, so each of us could in the dream be different from our awake selves and still not be our transcended self. So like, if my character in the dream maybe does not wear the same like office attire, skirt, heels, something like that, but is not necessarily it might be wearing like a spacesuit weirdly, and you're like, why are you wearing a spacesuit? This makes sense. But is still kind of recognizably herself in a way that the transcended self would not be. The transcended self would be, again, like a very other alter state. So I think it makes sense to have that delineation.
Mm-hmm. So, the way that I am interpreting the thing, and I don't say this to potentially like color anybody's other observations, because I want to hear what you wanted to do. But the way that I read that distinction is that there is a distinction between the conscious you and this other form, which we will lay out more when we answer questions about the avatar itself. But that in the dream, you are you. But the power of that dreamscape as a result is, because it is this separate, potentially freer, potentially less rigid space, it is possible either because you want it to be, or because subconsciously that is the way that you always see yourself anyway. You have the ability to have some sort of control over what you look like. And that can be in the sense of it investigating the vulnerability that we had discussed previously, an opportunity to see yourself as deeply as you wish that you could be seen in the real world. And that not only does that happen naturally, but it can, as a result of having to deal with the conspiracy, have its own risks as well, because you are now inadvertently revealing a vulnerable part of yourself to your enemies. Do any of those things sound potentially interesting to you?
I'm leaning towards, again, like, I feel like for my character, I think initially I would like it to feel less controlled. Because again, I think that she's coming from a position of less agency. And so I would almost want to, like, if not RNG it, then have there be a specific dream logic to whatever it is. So whereas someone else might either fit their dream sona better to whatever wherever we are in the dream, or have a more rigid representation of themselves no matter where we are in the dream world, I feel like my characters would either be more contextual or more just completely random.
Aha. I think that works for me.
Yeah, so like for example, oh, we're having an underwater dream. So my character then is either a mermaid or is wearing a diving suit, or go if that is how other people would approach the situation, as in other characters would fit in better, then my character be the one character that's just looking like her regular self, even though we're all underwater, and she should look like something underwater, an octopus. She's just not. She just looks like out of place all the time. So whichever way other people want to contextualize it, I feel like my character then would be kind of the odd person out, potentially, or fitting into the dream, whichever makes more sense.
Okay. And do you think that then this is a thing that is unique just to you? Or
I mean, it depends on what other people want to do. So I feel like it's a discussion we're having.
Okay.
So that would be like the tell that follows you around through dream space, or
I think there would have to be a secondary tell about it, because so for example, it's like if you wanted it to be that everybody else's character has a more fixed aspect when they enter the dream realm, then I think it would make sense for my character to not have a fixed aspect and to then modify with the location in a way such that then there has to be a secondary tell, be it like the weird ringtone noise or what have you. Or alternately, if every other character intrinsically, intuitively has learned how to fit into the different places in the dream world in a way by changing their avatar, not their avatar, but the way that they're represented contextually, then conversely, my character would be the one that always just kind of looks out of place, like they are just still themselves in a way, because they have unsuccessfully torn down the barrier in a way to allow themselves more freedom. So I'm willing to, I like either of those scenarios. I think is interesting to me.
I think the idea that your character is dream logic quirky out of place as a tall would play really interesting with the fact that my character's entire hang-up is that they vanish or disappear, so that when they first enter, no one sees them enter and you only notice when they look over. But then after that, they always just kind of seem to slip out of perception almost. Whether or not they're like that because they look exactly part of the landscape, or they still look like their mundane selves, but they're just completely glossed over. that's still up to creation logistics, but I kind of like the idea that your character and mine kind of mirror each other in that sense. And I also like the idea that like the same problem that plagues them on like an internal level in waking space follows them into dream space, while the physical aspects of like feeling chronic pain have disappeared. Like the internal struggle is still there. And like the only time that they're constantly perceived is when they transcend. Because I kind of like the idea, honestly, that this person looks the same regardless of what scenario they're from or that they're in, and the difference is really whether other people notice them. So when they're transcended, that's when they're seen 100% of the time. They don't have to fight to be like interpreted or understood, if we want to turn that into a metaphor, or basically just accepted as a part of everyday life. So they look entirely normal. They're just finally there for other people.
Yeah, I'm thinking of something weird enough like Doctor Who here, where it's kind of like the Doctor is just the Doctor, but the Doctor does have different faces. I mean, goes through different generations, but the Doctor is the Doctor no matter where they are, what time period they're in. And Doctor companions often will put on costumes to try to at least fit in a little bit, even if they can't speak right or, you know, whatever. So just to what degree that, because there still is generally a weird acceptance of the Doctor despite all logic. And so, like, because that can be a function of the dream as well, that like no matter how the characters look, they are just integrated into the dream logic with or without any physical changes, or they can physically change.
Yeah. I think that would be very neat to play with. The idea that the dream is allowing you to interact because it doesn't know what your decision is going to be until you do a thing in it. And then it responds to the decision that you do make based on its potential to pose a risk to it. And that's where the conflict arises, which I think would be kind of interesting to observe. Does anyone else have anything else that they wanted to raise before we continue to the next question? So to make sure, as much as possible, when it comes to these things, this and the next question in particular, that everybody feels like we're on the same page.
I think we're good to keep moving.
Cool. This is where it gets even more interesting then. What is your avatar? A perfect expression of your identity and will. It lives inside you, but has its own thoughts, emotions, and desires, and is alien to you. When you transcend, your avatar manifests and takes possession of your body. What dark secrets are they hiding? What do they yearn for? Why do you fear yours?
Because you already mentioned Yukio earlier, I'm just thinking of, again, the Protag's shift whenever the Millennium Puzzle goes disco.
Oh my god.
Yes, I have grown a foot in height and my hair is so much better.
I am Spike here, and
I have changed voice actors.
Yes.
I mean,
my entire wardrobe has shifted.
When you really actually think about it, Yami Yugi is perhaps the best touchstone for an avatar in any piece of media, because if Yugi and Yami Yugi both agree that they just want to win this card game, everything is fine. But often they will have disagreements on whether someone deserves to be murdered.
No, I still feel that the single best scene in all of original Yu-Gi-Oh! Is when little Yugi sets up a date for Yami Yugi and Anzu, pulls out Yami, bops into the puzzle himself to hide. And when Anzu walks in, Yami is screaming at the puzzle, "What are you doing? This isn't a card game. This isn't what we agreed on."
Yeah. Oh lord. Yu-Gi-Oh is so weird and silly. But yes.
So, I will start with my character is a she, her in the waking world, and their avatar is a they, them. With a substantial, physical appearance change. Completely different ass hairstyles for starters.
Okay. So I'm intrigued by I mean, I will say this ahead of everybody else's thoughts because I will come to you all in a moment. But because it stands out to me, I am intrigued by the questions of how one's avatar's perception in the dream is also a part of their of your PC's struggle with their own self-concept. Because if your avatar is by nature a separate entity to you, even though it resides within you, it means that you must also have feelings not only about the fact that you can portray yourself in this way in the dream, but that it stops being you and it is somewhat disconnected from you and has its own will. So I'm very curious if you've given any thoughts to that already as a result.
I have given such extensive thought to this. I've been extensively thinking about this for the last 2.5 years before we even heard of this game.
Okay, duly noted. So, in the interest of these questions then, as a result, I want to start backwards in that direction because of the potential for that question. Why do you fear your avatar?
I think to the big character, the avatar is a symbol of transgression and deviance. And essentially, if one was to become the avatar, they would be their perfect self, but it would be even harder for them in owning that power to live in the society around them. So, fear of the self, which is really just a fear of how difficult it would be to be that self, for reasons that aren't even your fault.
And I take it as a result that some part of that fear is also a kind of bitterness. Like, I wish it could be this easy, but I know that it isn't, and I'm not going to risk it. Oh my goodness. Such fertile drama. What does your avatar yearn for?
So, for me, the desires are going to be intimacy and agency.
Okay. And I take it you already have a virtue as well.
Let's roll elegant.
Okay, I like this a lot. What dark secrets are they hiding? Oh, do we want to discover that? Is that a thing that you want to reveal now? Or is that a thing that you want to reveal through play?
We will reveal this through play.
Okay, duly noted. I trust you implicitly. So, skipping randomly, Valerie, have you given any thought to your avatar?
I have primarily because, again, I feel like we're now sort of like tightening up where this is going to go. I think that the avatar of this character is probably going to be larger. So, one of the things that interest me is Steven Universe and the notion of the combining of gems into larger gems. And so I think that this character wants to be a giant woman. I think that's I think that something large and possibly Bayonetta like is going to be on the table here, because I think, again, in her daily life she is very like mousy, unobtrusive, professional.
Okay.
I'm in love already.
Yeah, I think that's gonna probably be something there. And a lot of what Yuri was saying about the different fears in terms of like yeah, I think that her virtue is probably going to be brave, because I think in her daily life she is not. I think she is very much a person who does as she is told and tends not to try to rock the boat even when she sees bad things happening. Like, she might try to voice a concern in the most, female, couched in lots of, maybe perhaps you might consider not doing something like this because of this reason, just trying to cushion it so much that it lacks all urgency or reality. And so I think brave for her. And then I think for desires, I think agency is definitely going to be one of them as well. But I'm trying to decide whether, because the control and agency have a similar thing, but agency is control over the self and control feels like control over others. And I don't think she wants control over others, but I think possibly escape is going to be the other one for her. If not escape, then maybe overthrow. So yeah, definitely agency though is going to be one of them.
Okay. Right. So a thing that was occurring in my brain is I wanted to ask a question specifically about that size issue, because Blades in the Dark mechanically has an issue with scale.
Yeah, it doesn't have to literally be a giant woman. It could just be like
like, I was gonna ask, are we Obsidian or are we just She-Ra?
Jasper? Maybe?
Yes. Okay, duly noted. I just wanted to be aware
but
of
yeah,
that distinction.
She-Ra's a good, yeah. Like, again, like going from I'm a reasonable sized person to I'm a She-Ra sized person. Yeah.
I used to be 5 foot. Now I'm 6'9". So yes, I dig this a lot. This works. Mike, what are your thoughts?
I have been chewing on many thoughts. I'm thinking that my avatar is like a painted marble statue from this world's analog to the Roman period or the classical period, but still painted in the way that the statues that we have tend to not be painted, barring the few that have like where there's been like reconstruction of like this is what this actually looked like. So I'm imagining a moving statue that like of a physical mold in the style of like the I am imagining the character Liberty from Eugene Delacroix's Liberty Leading the People from the July Revolution. And then some of the American analogs to that. Like I think there was some early set of imagery where there was a character Marianne who is associated with one or another of these revolutions. And so I'm imagining a character who is in that mold in terms of personality and iconography. So the very much like leading from the front revolutionary figure, and that this character is part of my character, but not all of the character. So the relationship between the untranscended character and the transcended character is more like ego, superego, or ego id, where the avatar is certain parts of you turned up a bunch.
I'm thinking like, you know that one episode of most science fiction television shows where somebody is accidentally split into their very best self and their very worst self?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm torn between bright or clever for virtue, and I'm thinking adoration and overthrow for desires. In the idea that a character like a figure like this, while aspirational, because of the type of game we're playing, has to be compromised or flawed in some ways. I'm tempted to do just the most obvious and name this avatar Deed, as in the propaganda of the deed in revolutionary politics. The idea that you just have to blow up the right thing and then the whole world will change, which obviously has large problems. So then the avatar's name would just be Deed. The other option would be to use something that's more like a divine verse, divine name. So it'd be like liberty, freedom, something, something, something.
I like the idea of just a noun. That's really rad. What about your avatar do you fear, Mike?
Let me think about it. What do I fear? I think that the avatar is like too bold, and to be the avatar would get this character killed in minutes in the waking world. And so there is a great fear in putting all of yourself on the line for what you believe in, of not being able to go home after the protest. And this avatar requires that level of 100% commitment, which I think fits for the Guardian playbook. Because like I'm keeping Eclipse in mind as well.
I like this a lot. That you are afraid of the consequences of doing the right thing, and that as a result, especially as a result of the desires that you've established for this avatar, they could just go, well, you will suffer those consequences. Has nothing to do with me. I'm gonna do the thing, and you have interacted with that in your own way.
Yep. So I think I'm going to settle on clever for virtue, unless someone else is really looking to do that, because I think having variety is good.
Well, then I guess we should move on to Yoi to find out if they're interested in the avatar being clever. So I'll ask you the same questions. What are your thoughts on your avatar?
I am not looking to take clever as the virtue, Mike, so you can take that if that is your indeed final decision. For my character, I was thinking of taking the virtue serene, just because in their everyday mundane state, they're very agitated. They're constantly looking for a problem or a person or a situation to hurl themselves against. They're literally the person who's always looking for a fight. And that in turn ties into why they would be afraid of their own avatar, because like the way they exist is not fun. They don't enjoy constantly looking for a fight or constantly needing someone to be better than, or constantly like just being super dissatisfied and like full of rage against a million things at once. Their avatar frightens them because I like to hold on to the notion that their avatar has like a very serene kind of rage, like the kind of anger and like honed down fury that becomes directed and that becomes productive, that lets you, you know, really buckle down and have immense clarity about a task, as opposed to like the fog of just needing to like beat the crap out of something for, or like just destroy yourself against a task for its own sake, as opposed to actually achieving something. And so the mundane self would fear the avatar because ultimately accepting it would be reckoning and accepting the fact that, you know, all that suffering was not necessary. And in a sense, all that suffering was self-inflicted. Like, you didn't need to be this kind of mad in order to get something done. You didn't need to be this kind of hurting and enraged and lost to find the path, to do the right thing, so to speak. So it's like that fear of having lost time, which would be interesting, tied into like the rest of the world being liminal space. That'd be really cool. And I think for the avatar desires, I think overthrow and supremacy would be the closest thing, because the avatar is like the version of this mundane self that's finally perceived and finally listened to and finally able to impact the world. So overthrow is not quite the right word, but I think capitulation or acknowledgement is what I'm trying to go for. So like,
it doesn't necessarily want power, but they do
not
want
necessarily,
to
but
be...
they want, yeah, they want to be able to like have that presence, to be able to like part the sea, so to speak.
What is the
like
word for that? There is a word on the tip of my tongue that you are empowering in this moment that I really, really dig. Is it like... It's not authority either, because authority also comes with a certain level of actual power. But like...
I think impulsion, because they're impelling people to do something.
Yeah.
Or because conviction is the noun of what they are doing to other people. And like the impelling is to like create that.
Because the only other word that comes to mind is clout, and I'm not going to write clout. But I do know what you're going for, and I like it a lot.
Yeah. And also kind of playing off of Mike's idea of looking like a statue, again, pulling into the visual element of being eclipsed, I kind of want to go through like the crystal person that Kita becomes in Atlantis, the Lost Empire. And so like when they eclipse, they literally go dark. Yeah, just kind of playing off of that idea. But like their figure still is very mundane. Like I like the idea that this person is still in like their day-to-day like job clothes and stuff when they enter the dream world, and when they become crystal illuminated heart of a diamond person, they're still like, I don't know, in their shop apron or something like that. But they have that overwhelming supernatural presence wrapped up in something very mundane.
And also, I am realizing at the insistence of several people that the word that we're looking for is perhaps indeed influence. I think that works.
Hmm.
So with that, Iori, what does your avatar look like?
Definitely like much shorter hair than the character has in the waking world. A different color. I think. I'm really sorry. I don't know the name of this color in English, but it's Wasa and Nagasairo, and I am looking to see if I can just find. Okay, the name of this color in English is hashtag 89C3EB, okay? It's like a light grayish pale blue.
Okay.
And like the avatar self is more visibly androgynous, I think.
Yeah, it's almost a robin's egg blue.
No, that robin's egg blue is like Tiffany blue. This one has much more gray in it.
Okay. I'm having so many feelings about the fact that we are briefly into the weeds about color, because that's exactly the kind of mode that I want us to be on a regular basis.
Well, in another lifetime when I was in grad school, we regularly referred to the traditional colors dictionary. Because this was necessary for parsing all the really complex kimono layering patterns that were used in the ancient court. So now, like, my entire color vocabulary, my entire like sense of colors has been reinformed by this, because there are so many very precise shades of blue and purple and so forth.
I see. Duly noted. I'm going to literally write that code.
Like, I think the best way I could translate it directly to English would be the color of forget-me-not grass. Wasara Nagasa is a plant. It's used in poetry to make puns about not forgetting things, so.
Oh, yes, I know. I have a lot of feelings about it because it's unnecessarily poetic in every language. Don't get me started about Finnish. But yes, I dig this a lot.
Rock God in chat has it right. It's like gray blue, but weird.
Weird is exactly what we're going for, so I dig this a lot. I think I have everything on that front, except for, so I have all of the virtues and desires for all of your avatars, but now they need names. Following in Mike's footsteps, I will recommend, although you do not need to do the thing, that if we are acting under the assumption that all of these avatars are theoretically from the same space or from the same drive that they have generated from the same ultimate process, that they should all have similar names. So if we are agreeing as a result that the name of Mike's character's avatar is Deed, then it would stand to reason that all of your names, all of your avatar names would be singular noun. But that can also be complicated, obviously, because Deed as a noun is both describing a countable object and describing an abstract. So you are free to consider that complexly as you will. I will also say that if you do not have the spoons, bones, what do we call them now, to process that name now, you do not have to, but we will get to that. But so long as we can get to the point where I can know what your avatar's name is, that would be very useful as well. So if anybody has an idea then about what their avatar's name is, I would like to hear it.
So, because I wound up taking the playbook that I was eyeing, my thought for their mundane name would be Ruth, and the name for their transcended self would be Ruthless.
I like that a lot.
I also have an adjective name.
Mm-hmm.
My avatar is bitter.
Uh-huh. And Valerie?
Yeah, I still have to think about mine, I think.
Cool. We will get to that point. And I am noting that I now have your character's name, and I will get to everyone's other character stuff in a bit, but I wanted to get through all of the series questions first. So, next, our transgressions. How do we defy the dream's form and order?
Is it about not being subsumed by, or actually, is the dream not the conspiracy?
The dream, not the conspiracy.
That's a different answer. Sorry.
I mean, the dream can also potentially have its own will and seek to make you a part of that will if that is a matter of seeing you as a part of itself or always wanting to make things weird and strange around you. Just because it is called form and order doesn't mean that it has to be neat and tidy as well.
I think the way we defy the dream might be the sheer fact of our lucidity and agency within it.
Aha. Agency is coming up a lot and I like it.
We have a piece of paper that lets us do what we want. It's the paper from Doctor Who, but it literally just says.
I actually was thinking Ron Swanson, so
Yeah.
I thought you meant the character sheet.
Well, both. The character sheet says, I do what I want.
Does anyone else have any ideas, or does that work for everyone?
Yep,
Yeah,
that
and
works for me.
I think with the agency, there's the question of like, do each of us kind of assert our own form and order within the dream rather than that which is given to us?
Uh-huh. And I think that also fits the conspiracy in its own way as well, very obviously, since we are discussing history, etc. There is room for that to be a sense of, are you being honest about your own space in your own place in society, or is society trying to tell you what is real about you and your world? What truths can we share only with each other?
Gestures at Avatar.
Yeah, because the answers we did for what do we hide from others were vulnerability and authenticity. So this feels like an analog to that.
Uh-huh.
I think even going a little deeper, speaking of authenticity and vulnerability, what ties the crew together is that each person knows what each other person wants, without the trappings and the obstacles of mundane/waking life. I think that's the easiest, most concrete way of framing authenticity and vulnerability between the characters, is that every person in the crew knows what every other person genuinely wants. Whether it's something like day to day, like, oh, they really want a bubble tea, or, you know, something extremely drastic, like, I want to burn down the post office, you know, that kind of thing.
Noted. Oh god. Okay. What would happen if anyone found us out?
I feel like the kind of the powers would want to media saturate the dream world as well. So is it about like using us, or like studying is it the like lab experiment thing of, you can do this thing, we want access to be able to kind of use capitalism to colonize dream space?
I think that, and the more immediate threat of kind of like the Golden Compass / his Dark Materials view of like severing the avatar from the self and like putting them in a bottle or wherever they go, to kind of experiment on them with. I think that is something that's pretty sinister, and also I would think genuinely existentially terrifying to these characters. Even if they fear their avatars, is still something deeply personal and, again, deeply authentic and deeply intimate, and vulnerable. So like, to have somebody literally excise that from you and kind of run off with it to do whatever, I think as the immediate fear, whereas the colonization of dream space is like the more abstract overall fear. Yeah, because I'm thinking like in dream space, I don't know if we want to have the immediate fear of like, oh no, I lose life and limb, but rather I lose my most authentic self and I don't ever gain it back. And or if I do gain it back, it's been irrevocably changed by someone who's not me.
I think there's also perhaps a fear of consequences that spill into the mundane world, but the extent to which that would happen would definitely vary by character. Like, for mine, it would probably just be social ostracism, where for Mike's character, it might be more like arrest, death.
And I also think that one of the like unique things that comes out of that observation is there's a way to try to milk capitalist value from the work that you do, but it is different depending on what is being valued or taken from you in that moment. But the result is still the same. How do we turn it into value? That I think is very intriguing. And hold on. Last but not least, the questions: what comes at the dream's end? What will be left of the waking world should the conspiracy devour the dream?
Given everything that we've talked about, it seems like it would make sense for the conspiracy to somehow cut off people from being able to manifest their authentic selves in the dream world in any way. And so it feels like if the conspiracy wins, then they gain a control over the dream world that gives them greater control over the waking world in a way that perpetuates the mundane and unjust.
Or is it, because if this is the conspiracy, it wants to shatter the barrier, and it is a history.
But we've also established that the relationship that history has with well, with the real world is complex, that it is or can seek to empower a kind of present and future that is hostile to us, which can manifest in all manner of ways. And in this kind of lens could be a sense of, to hazard a very terrible turn of phrase, bring us back to the good old days, which as a rule has with it a great deal of kind of complacency, a kind of rigidity that could attempt to be reinforcing the idea that this is the way that the world should be, and we will even rob you of your sense of self in order to ensure that you perform that role. Which, both in the dream and in the process of shattering the barrier between the two, can very well be a sense of making your experience in the dream be just more work, which is a very Matrix Resurrections idea of, we are trying to milk as much productivity out of you as possible, even when you do not think that you are thinking. Which I think would be kind of cool if you all agree.
Yeah, I like that.
Mike, what do you think?
I was looking at character stuff, so I missed it. Sorry.
I guess I was just getting a sense of whether you think that that was a valuable way for that to go.
Yeah, because I think it's interesting the ways in which kind of society writ large, where its desires overlap and contrast with the conspiracy. Because it seems like both want to create a specific world state of, this is how things are, and slash have been slash ought to be slash always have been, and us being in conflict with both of those, I think, is very interesting. But I'm sometimes struggling to differentiate those societal impulses from each other, while thinking that the game wants us to have these be at least not they're not exactly the same thing, even if they overlap.
Okay. And if our dreams were free of the darkness, what might we wake up to find?
I feel like this circles back to agency, because I feel like that keeps coming up a lot. I feel like the other word that I'm going to reach for, which is one that no one has quite touched on yet, but was in the list, is apotheosis. Just this notion of people having the personal control and power and freedom to manifest their best selves, and to not have to worry about whether, like, to be able to be authentic and not be confined by the social structures and the preferences and predilections of the conspiracy, which is attempting to define things with greater rigidity.
I would go a little further and would say that the systems in place to like just constantly bombard the people in this world with just messages of doing this or doing that, that in itself kind of eases or is no longer there to such a degree. Like, if we go with the idea that the waking world is just so powerfully overstimulating that it's false in that kind of sense, like it's just much more than what existence should be, because it has been deliberately dialed up in order to kind of break people into the shapes that they want. So there's more of a balance between like the kinds of things that you like, the severity to which you experience life in the dream world versus the waking world as well.
So I dig this a lot. This is so everything that we have generated gives me a very good idea of some very cool things that I want to do and play. But the other thing is, those questions also lead into choosing a name for the series that reflect those answers. So, a funny thing happened when we prepared for this game. All of these lovely people in chat. So last night, as an aside, I guess, even though this actually really matters, we watched Paprika, because it's rad, and I wanted us to get an opportunity to like viscerally engage with a touchstone before we played. And we had a lot of thoughts about the game that we wanted to play, many of which you have just seen us discuss live in concert for the answers to these questions. And one of the things that just kind of manifested, which I like a lot in part because one of these characters is an Oracle of the Dream, is the idea that there is an oracular process through which one can externally engage with the dream that is not the same as the dream. And that just kind of manifested as, what if there was a dream tarot? And I like the idea so much that I literally wrote the thing down. I literally have on this page that you're not going to see 99 cards for an oracle deck about the process of dreaming. Many of which are just very rad and very cool, and I'm both very excited and very upset at all of these lovely people for triggering the idea for me to make a tarot deck, because I will make the thing now. But one of the things that materialized in that conversation as a result is, well, what are the suits of this deck? Of the minor arcana of this space. And we realized that because dreams are aliminal and be in a lot of ways about getting from one place to the other, the suits as a result are just the processes by which we enter through liminal space. Literally descriptions of the exact same processes that the cast discussed as the way that you navigate the dream. As a result, one of those suits is mirrors, because your own reflection is not only an ability to observe yourself, but the ability to observe space being warped and your relationship to that warped space. Each suit in the deck has what is essentially a face card in that suit. That is the description of what that process would look like if it were broken. So there is a card in the deck called the Shattered Mirror. And I think as not only a discussion of how our own perception of ourselves can be warped, but how the metaphysical liminal process through which you engage in passing from the real world to the dream can be distorted or severed, makes it a very good, interesting name for the thing.
Well,
but I
mean,
am also open to us not having to do the thing.
the last item on the player agenda on our playbook sheets is gaze into the broken mirror. I'm just saying.
That is indeed true. So, the potential
I will
obvious
offer-
badness of putting that name on the internet notwithstanding.
I will additionally add, since this is we are doing the Maze of Dreams playset. So it could be maybe a maze of broken mirrors, because mirror mazes being their own thing.
We're not going to be able to find a title for this that doesn't sound like a YA novel, are we?
No. In fact, we should be leaning into that as a goal.
An X of Y and Z. Plug in some nouns for me, friends.
A maze of smoke and mirrors.
Oh lord, oh lord, oh lord.
Are we sure that's not taken?
I am not sure that's not taken.
I'm confident that that book exists. But then again, I'm confident that all of those permutations exist. What is a synonym for mirror? This is, I'm asking chat to suddenly become a thesaurus for me.
Looking glass?
I mean, if you want to go vaguely horror movie, The Mirror. Mirror with a view of hell.
Variant would be broken reflections.
Wait, no, hang on. A mirror with a view of hell kind of rocks.
So
Like,
long.
I
It's
would
so huge.
absolutely call my debut metal album by that title.
It is a
We
very
could
good
go with-
title.
We could go with Mirror with a View.
We could also continue discussing this offline.
Yes, that is also true. But I say all of these things to say that when you see us in session 1, we will have a title for you all to engage with, because I think that would be really cool. Oh my god, Arv, no, behave yourself. But
I mean, I like that title. It's a good title.
So the only other things that need to happen do not need to happen in this session 0. These are obviously details that we can leave for you all to discover in play, including the map that I have generated online for the city space that we will be setting the story in, which I will ask our strange friends to populate some buildings in, so they know where they're going and what important things happen in those places. But one of the other one of the other world building things that I did want to do, while I leave most of the character sheets as they are for people to discover through play, because I like being surprised by what your abilities are, I'm going to ask you all about someone who is not here with you in this season. This is season 2 of the story that you are engaged in. And in season 1, there were actually 5 of you. Something has, as a result, happened to make that 5th person no longer be present. But I wanted to get a sense of how your relationship with that person has shaped your ability to continue from this point onward. So first, I want to ask, not their name, but all of their other qualifying characteristics. What is this person's age and what is this person's gender? Valerie, I can see gears turning in your brain.
Yeah, my impulse is for them to be older than us and a mentor figure. And for it to be they them. That is my overall predilection here.
And regardless of the fact that they were the mentor and have been more experienced at this than all of us, they were, I think, the biggest optimist in the group.
I like the idea that they've been at it so long that maybe they started off optimistic and they dipped down through a low crisis point and then swung back around to the potential. that the
Yeah,
crew
they had
are-
already recovered from their disillusioned cynic phase.
Yeah, so it's like an informed kind of optimism, the wise optimism, so to speak.
Neat. I like that a lot. Mike.
Yeah, I was thinking like, oh, okay, like the thing that I went to is having my character be the Gailed Dornick to the fifth character's Harry Seldon, since the Foundation TV show has been a thing. Of like, you have the person who articulated the powerful and deeply socially unacceptable hypothesis, and then they're gone. What do you do?
Uh-huh.
And like, okay, like that's certainly a version that makes sense for me and for my character, but I want to make sure that like that there is a good charged relationship for everybody. It's just the thing that came to mind here, so I threw it out.
Mm-hmm. So it's also fair to say that they were the ones. They were the one who not only introduced you to being able to navigate the dream, but brought you into the fold of doing the work that you do in the dream in the first place.
I think that would make sense, yeah.
Okay. Does that mean that when they taught you how to navigate the dream, they taught you it in order to fulfill that mandate, or because they thought it would be cool for you all to be able to do the same thing that they can do?
I like the idea of being taught dream skills in order to fulfill a particular mandate, because that would align very nicely with the mentor role that we are positing for them, and it would also give each of the characters impetus to continue that work, given this character's now absence in season 2.
Okay.
Tentative agree. I think it would be interesting if maybe the characters don't all know the overarching plan to the same extent, and or are not fully informed of why they should be doing the things they've been asked to do.
Is it also possible that this person had at one point rescued you all from the dream individually when you were somewhat complicit in the conspiracy?
Yep.
I see. Noted. What was their relationship to their avatar? Do you think that their relationship was just as complex and unhealthy as your own, or did they potentially unlock something that might have been more healthy or more revelatory about that relationship?
I think this might tie back to like having gone through the disillusioned phase and then come back out with the informed optimism. Part of that process would have been the fraught relationship with their avatar resolving into something approaching a coherence of identity.
Uh-huh.
I kind of want to lean in on that and say that maybe they were the Harmony playbook. Like they had become
and
essentially
their mundane self and avatar kind of fused.
Yeah, they had literally achieved self-actualization. And maybe they were a previous playbook, like early on in their dream shaping career, but then their final form was the Harmony. And I think given the fact that the Harmony is in a way almost the antithesis of what the Outsider is, I think it would be really interesting if my previous rival had been the mentor in a very weird way.
Okay.
Setting the stage for my own class change partway through. maybe
I
not.
love
I don't know.
Okay. And finally and most importantly, they're not here right now because something bad has happened. What happened?
I want to say that if we're working, if the failure mode, if the conspiracy winning mode involves separation of avatar from self, then I would say that's what happened to them. That after they achieved this kind of perfection, it's like imagine Garnet forcibly split in two kind of thing, and then one half taken away. So that kind of like destruction of self makes sense to me.
And I think the playbook for the harmony specifies that if you are separated, you then are just like in a cycle of desperate actions trying to become reunited.
I see.
I think even...
Which also might explain how we lost them.
I think it would be really interesting if their mundane self was lost in the dream world, but then the avatar self was lost in the waking world. Because that's an interesting inversion of where exactly either self can exist. So there's that element of kind of oscillation between the two. And so the crew would not only have to go into the dream world to do stuff, but also do things in the mundane world that puts their physical selves in danger. And I bring this up because I don't really want the entire campaign to take place only in the dream world. I would like there to be some action in the physical world as well. So if there was like something we had to search for, like something as important as this other person, in both worlds, then that would help handily provide that narrative pressure.
Yeah, definitely. And I do want to also mention that there are ways in which I want to manifest the process of preparing for a dream mission beginning in the real world. So having more opportunities to interact with the real world in ways that are not necessarily all the same is also a thing that I'm very excited to do. So yes, this is particularly interesting. So the last thing that I will ask as a result, especially because we've established all of these things, is I'm not going to ask you to name them, but I do want you to name their avatar. And I want Yoy in particular to name the avatar.
Screech?
Oh Lord. I will make that
Sorry,
different
you're
choice.
like the Saved by the Bell character.
Oh my god, I'm taking a drink for that. Good Lord.
Put that on your bingo
Is that
card,
your
everyone.
final?
Brandon takes a drink.
Is that
No,
your
no,
final
no.
answer? Okay, cool.
No.
I would take it either way. I'm not picky, but
I guess if the avatar was not so much the idealized self, but the idealized balance to their self, it would be an issue of like what that ideal counterweight to them was. Like what aspect of their personality was it that gave them that even keel, so to speak, that made them self-actualized. But we don't really know the character besides the fact that, you know, that's what the avatar was.
Okay.
Was the avatar just named Harmony? Or the name of the combined self?
I do like the
Wait,
idea
is this going to be one of those portmanteau names like Brangelina? Like
No.
they're just going to have their couple name as their avatar or as their unified self name?
I mean, you would believe that if this is their actualized self, then that's just like they know what their name is, and it's just a name, and it's not like defined by its relationship to anything else. It is just the name that they know is their name. If that makes sense.
I like playing off of the idea of like a sound name that like euphony or symphony or something that indicates like there's multiple chords that are all together.
Yeah. Euphony would be rad.
I think euphony would be, that's the one I'm kind of sticking on first. Like springing off of the harmony idea. Euphony.
Okay. So now that we know uh, those season one stakes, I'm very intrigued to find ways to pull out those strings for this series. Um, so yes, I know that we've gone a little bit long, so I know that there are some other things that we will do privately and some other things that we will also establish in our first session. But how do you feel about the world building that we have done so far?
I am so psyched about playing in this space.
I am very excited.
Yeah, I think we could go another 3 hours, but we should do those 3 hours in dramatic play rather than this form.
Yes, it is presently 26 minutes to the top of the hour where we all are, and that's varying degrees of late. So it'd be very unfortunate for us to just continue having all of these engaging discussions. But I am very inspired to see what happens as we continue um, with this series. I'm very excited for us to discover the name of the thing. Um, Hopefully, a name will manifest that is also good for the internet. I'm also very eager to to do card things because that tarot really does that tarot deck really is planning to exist. It insists upon it. So those might be episode names very eagerly. But until that next session, which will be very very soon, I will instead ask all of you lovely people to please tell all the lovely people in chat who you are, what you do, and where they can find you. Starting with Mike.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mike. I am one of the 3 co-hosts of Speculate, along with Brandon and Greg Wilson, aka Arv, our host. He, him pronouns for me. I stream video games at twitch.tv/turbotango on Wednesdays and Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and I write science fiction fantasy books. Follow my writing and stuff at patreon.com/Michael R. Underwood. That's me.
Nice. Next, Valerie.
I am Valerie Valdez. I continue to be the writer of books such as Chilling Effect, Prime Deceptions, and the forthcoming Fault Tolerance, which you can pre-order now. Pairs well with Mike's book Annihilation Aria. You can find me online at valerievaldez.com, at Valerie Valdez on Twitter, and also on Twitch at The Kids Are Asleep.
Nice. Next, Yoy.
Hello and very soon goodbye. I am Yoi Goeng Lin, pronouns he, they, game and fiction writer. You can find me at on Twitter at This Is My Design. Design is capital DASEIN for those who are listening to this as opposed to watching. It is a animal pun and philosophy joke, as always.
And Iori.
Kusano Iori, Clarion West class of 2017, they, them pronouns. I write things, I podcast things. You can find me at kusanoiori.com or on Twitter at Iori Kusano. That is spelled IORI, no L's in my name. And keep an eye on my Twitter, American Monday. I have a very exciting announcement upcoming.
I'm very excited for that announcement. As for me, I have been your humble stage manager this evening, Brandon O'Brien, pronouns he, him, or they, them. You can find me on Twitter at The Rising Tides. And you can find my game projects at therisingtides.itch.io, including the Fugitives playsheet that all of these lovely strange friends used for The Case of the Sinded Seal, our previous Speculate series. I am one of the co-hosts of Speculate alongside Michael R. Underwood and Gregory A. Wilson. And you can find more information about Speculate at speculatesf.com. And a reminder that your support of Speculate via patreon.com/speculate helps us to do these kinds of cool things, including Playgirl by Moonlight, which we're very excited to show you more of because Evil Hat does cool things. Girl by Moonlight is coming very, very soon, and we'd love to give you more opportunities to see what cool things like this look like in advance. So, thank you so very much for checking out this evening's Session 0. We will have more information about when session 1 begins and what the name of this series will be very, very soon. So please stay tuned to this channel to hear more about that. But until that happens, I'm going to ask all of these lovely people to please bid good night to all of these lovely folks in chat. Thank you so very much, and I very much look forward to playing again with you soon, but I'm going to disappear very briefly as I come over here. Thank you all again for checking out this evening's Speculate special event on this channel, Girl by Moonlight. I'm very excited to get into more of this game with you all. As you can see, we've done some very intense world building, and that's not withstanding what the city looks like and what some of the people in it look like. So look forward to discovering more about that through play. I think that will be a lot of fun. Thank you so very much for tuning in for this particularly long stream. Typically, I try not to keep it this long because it is very late for most of us. It is minutes to midnight over here, unfortunately. But I am still so very grateful that you stuck around, and I'm very excited to show you all actual play movement of Girl by Moonlight very, very soon in our next session, which you'll find out more information about very, very soon. So, first and foremost, thank you to Arvan Elron. Thank you to Greg for giving us the opportunity to do these cool things on your channel. I am very excited about this. I keep saying that I'm very excited, but you will hopefully hear more about the level of excitement when the game actually continues. Because Girl by Moonlight is actually really rad, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to GM it, to play it with these strange friends in particular, a group of people who I really love playing games with all of a sudden. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to share that space with them and with you all, and that wouldn't happen if it weren't for Greg giving me the opportunity to be in this space. So thank you so very much. Shout out to the mods that passed through tonight's stream, including Arudinel X4, Rock God, and Triffity Mats. Thank you so very much for being, as Greg continually says, the best mods in the business, and that is the God's honest truth. Thank you so very much. Specifically to Triffity Mats for nuking one bot early in the stream. Thank you so very much for all of the good work that you do, keeping this community safe from weirdness. And thank you so very much to everyone that passed through tonight's stream. Arvan Elron, Arudinel X4, Rock God, Triffid Emats, Nonstop, Actual Factual. Thank you so very much to Andrew Gillis. Thank you so very much for passing through the stream. I hope that you will continue to patronize us as we continue this series, because we're having a lot of fun just thinking about the game, and I'm very excited to see what the game actually looks like in play. So thank you for joining us, and I hope that you will continue to join us as the series continues. Thank you to Alliterative Alias, Axeman808, Bean Juice Dits, Cat Rambo, Crit Twitch, Determinology Z, Dr. Hunter, Erabs, Gigafrost, Gut Cut Chuck, Harlequin, Kusani Iori, Mrs. Dunsill, Prince Justin, Saint Pomelo, The Kids Are Asleep, The Sparkly Wallflower, Turbo Tango, Von Meat, Wolf Brother 7, and Xylane. And again, obviously, thank you so very much to Iori Kusano, Yoi Gawain Lin, Valerie Valdez, and Michael R. Underwood for coming and agreeing to play this thing with us. We're going to be having a lot of shenanigans. I'm very excited to do some surreal stuff in the dreamscape of In a Maze of Dreams. I'm like, a lot of ideas are already jumping in my head about what to name the thing, but I also want the name of the thing to fit in Twitch for once, because if you hadn't noticed, the case of the Cindered Seal was quite a mouthful. But thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to do the thing again with you all very soon. A reminder that for me, you will see me again next week Sunday as we get back into Sound Clash the Clampdown with the lovely crew of A Cordial Eclectic. That's going to be a lot of fun. When last we left off that game, some shenanigans were actively taking place that that the band still had to respond to, so that's going to be very delightful. A reminder as well that I will be GMing a game of Tales from the Loop for Bag of Giving on the 29th at 8 p.m. EST. So please definitely check that out as well. That's going to be very delightful. As for the things that will happen on this channel starting from the rest of this week, if I am not mistaken, there will be, in fact, nothing on Monday, but on Tuesday, definitely check out Adventures in Middle-earth Erebor Adventures at noon, and then Pen and Pixels D&D with GOG Ghosts of Saltmarsh at GOG.com, at twitch.tv/GOG.com, starting from 4 p.m. So that will be a lot of fun on Tuesday, and of course I will be on twitch.tv/The Rising Tides on Monday evening if you'd like to enjoy more Chroma Squad, but that will be for you to discover on Monday. As for this evening, again, thank you so very much. I'm still very flustered trying to think all of the things that I'm thinking about this game because I'm very delighted to do the thing. But you will find out more about Girl by Moonlight next month. And until then, I hope that you all have a wonderful evening, a wonderful week, and most importantly, sweet dreams. Have a good one, everyone.